Chapter 893. His voice was majestic and awe-inspiring. It instantly enveloped the entire area. It was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. Everyone's hearts skipped a beat, and they subconsciously looked up. They saw that the void between the dark sky and earth was cleansed, and ripples were everywhere. Then, a tall figure slowly appeared. It was like an illusion, but it also carried an unparalleled pressure. It made people subconsciously submit to him. Some people standing nearby could no longer withstand the pressure. Their legs went soft, and they almost knelt down. Countless pairs of eyes stared at him with different reactions. Shock, astonishment, uneasiness. Excitement, reverence, and admiration. It was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He was wearing a long, dark green robe. He was tall, straight, and elegant. His body was translucent, and he looked like a soul. There were no force fluctuations around him. But just by standing there, he exuded an aura of nobility that was ingrained in his bones. Just when countless people were wondering who this person was, Shang Wanyu was the first to react. He widened his eyes in shock and exclaimed, "Master, you're so powerful." He exclaimed, "Taizu." This voice directly caused everyone to be stunned on the spot. Taizu, Taizu. There was only one person in the world who could make Shang Wanyu call him that, the founder of the Tianling dynasty, Taizu Shang Wanjing. But didn't he pass away a long time ago? Rumor had it that he passed away in the Tianling god realm. Why did he appear now? Taizu looked down, and his gaze became gentler. You're Shang Wanyu. Judging from his attitude toward you, just now, he's not bad. Originally, Taizu still had some complaints about Shang Wanyu. They felt that he had a lot to do with the current situation. However, seeing that he seemed to be full of love and care for you, Taizu's dissatisfaction lessened a lot. Even his attitude toward Shang Wanyu improved a lot. In an instant, the natural intimacy that originated from the bloodline made Shang Wanyu believe that the person in front of him was indeed Taizu. He couldn't hide his excitement and immediately knelt down to kowtow. Junior Shang Wanyu greets Taizu. Since His Majesty had knelt, the rest of the people could only follow suit. Everyone in front of and behind Lang Kuan Hall also hurriedly knelt down. Greetings, Taizu. There were too many people, and when they shouted in unison, their shouts shook the sky. Get up. Taizu's deep voice sounded. At the same time, everyone felt a gentle force lift them up. That is, the power of Taizu. Many people were secretly shocked. It was rumored that Taizu was at the peak of the 9th stage, only a step away from the pericelestial stage. Looking at it now, it was indeed worthy of its reputation. Just this move alone was enough to easily crush everyone present. Elder Chen Ku and the others were all moved, tears welling up in their eyes. Taizu. It's really Taizu. As elders of the royal family, they were considered the most loyal servants of the Tianling royal family. Now that they were able to see Taizu with their own eyes, it wasn't hard to imagine how excited they were. Taizu's gaze landed on Yuan Wei and the others, and he sighed softly. This is the child of the Yuan family, right? He looks very similar to Mingchen. Yuan Mingchen was the ancestor of the Yuan family. Yuan Wei was in fear and trepidation. Yuan Wei greets Taizu. There were very few clans that remained standing after 1,000 years, and they were still loyal to the Tianling dynasty to this day. It was indeed very rare. Taizu nodded. Everyone present, whether it was the officials in the Imperial court or the people from the sects, had actually yet to recover from their shock. The hall was very quiet. In front of such a supreme figure, everyone subconsciously kept quiet and was incomparably respectful. Among them, only Shang Wanwan was shocked. She knelt on the ground and looked at everything in a daze. Her mind was blank. Her limbs were numb, and her heart skipped a beat. All the blood in her body seemed to have frozen at this moment. Just now, when Taizu appeared, he said something. He said, "She's not worthy." Was he speaking up for Chu Luyue? Could it be that even Taizu was helping Chu Luyue? Just as she was filled with doubts, she saw Taizu move and land beside the Tianling scepter. Although Sheng Wanyu was also standing beside it, compared to him, his aura was instantly much weaker. Taizu was Taizu. There was no need to say anything. He just stood there, and he was the absolute king. After he landed, he first glanced at the Tianling scepter and shook his head. It's been so many years. Why are you still so impulsive like a child? He had clearly seen the Tianling scepter's performance just now. The Tianling scepter was shining brightly, and it seemed to be very righteous. It had helped him guard the Tianling dynasty for so many years, and it was bored to death. Why won't you let me exercise my muscles? Taizu laughed. He couldn't do anything about it. He turned to look at Chu Luyue and waved. "Girl, come here." As soon as he said that, countless people's tense expressions cracked again. Who was Taizu calling just now? Chu Luyue. Moreover, his tone was clearly very intimate and doting. Even the way he treated Sheng Wanyu just now was far from this. Chu Luyue blinked. Originally, she didn't want to trouble Taizu. After all, this was her own matter, and she could rely on her own ability to solve it. In fact, Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Wanwan had indeed been exposed, and there was no room for them to struggle. However, Sheng Wanwan's words just now had clearly provoked Taizu. She glanced at Sheng Wanwan, who was kneeling on the floor, from the corner of her eye. She found that Sheng Wanwan's face was as pale as a ghost and her eyes were unfocused, as if she had suffered a huge blow. Her energy and thoughts were all exhausted. Chu Luyue put away the long yuan sword and walked forward. Countless gazes followed her as she walked, as if they were afraid of missing something. Chu Luyue walked to the bottom of the 9 steps, stood still, and bowed. Taizu. Taizu waved again. Come up. Chu Luyue hesitated. Ordinary people couldn't climb these 9 steps. Under normal circumstances, only the emperor could stand on it. Although she had already revealed her identity, Taizu and her father were both here. If she went up, after thinking for a moment, she finally lifted her foot and went up. Unlike Sheng Wanwan, who had encountered many obstacles when she went up, Chu Luyue climbed up the steps with incomparable ease. Her feet seemed to be riding the wind. Everyone only saw the corners of her clothes fluttering, and then she was already standing on the 9 steps. Although I haven't appeared in 1,000 years, I should have some say in the matters of the Tianling dynasty, right? Taizu said with a smile and glanced at Sheng Wanwan. Just now, you said that if I accept you, it will cause dissatisfaction with the ancestors of the Tianling dynasty. Sheng Wanwan trembled like a sieve, and her face was pale. Then today, I will announce to the world. She is the most outstanding junior of the Shengwan clan. Not only will she be the princess, but even the future emperor will also be her. I want to see which bastard dares to jump out and say no. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveNet. Chapter 894. Taizu had personally announced that he would become the emperor. Such a thing had never happened before, and it would probably never happen again in the future. To allow Taizu to reappear in the world and protect him in every way possible, not to mention the previous things, just this alone was enough to secure Chu Luyue's position as the emperor of Tianling. Sheng Wanwan felt as if she had been struck by lightning. The last glimmer of hope in her eyes completely disappeared. How could this be? How could this be? Sheng Wan, you should have died 2 years ago. How could she still come back? How could she still receive the support of so many people after destroying everything that she had worked so hard to obtain? Even the great ancestor was supporting her like this. Since Taizu had already spoken, what else could others say? Shang Wanwan knew that her last bargaining chip was useless, and her heart was dead. She slowly raised her head and looked at Chu Luiyue, who was standing in front of her. She was stunned for a while before she couldn't help but chuckle. Her face was filled with despair and mockery. Ha! No wonder you were so bold. So you still had this last trump card. Shang Wanyu, you're ruthless. Who can be your opponent? Who can? If only she had known this would happen, she thought that she had won, but in the end, she had suffered a crushing defeat. She had become a joke to the world. At this point, she really didn't have any chance of turning the tables. Jiang Yuqing, who was not far away, frowned when he saw Taizu. The situation today was worse than he had expected. Even Chu Luiyue himself was shocked. He couldn't help but widen his eyes slightly as he looked at Taizu. Taizu, she knew that Taizu was speaking up for her, but to give such a promise. It was indeed far beyond her expectations. You deserve this. Taizu shook his head gently and said affirmatively. Whether it's your talent, strength, or character, they are all impeccable. It's the blessing of Tianling to have you. Taizu said this with incomparable sincerity. If it weren't for Chu Luiyue, he would still be trapped in the Tianling God realm, unable to see the light of day. As time passed, his final soul would very likely dissipate without a trace. The Dragon Abyss Sword has recognized you as its new master, and the Tianling Scepter has also recognized you. In this world, there is no one more suitable than you to stand here. There were many people who could obtain the recognition of the Tianling Scepter, but she was the only owner of the Long Yuan Sword. Now, you can be considered to have inherited my mantle. Why can't you immediately take over the Heaven's Writ? Chu Luiyue coughed and glanced at his imperial father. Unexpectedly, Shang Wanyu also agreed with him. Taizu is right. Yu had been very intelligent since she was young, and she had handled the affairs of the imperial court extremely well. Originally, when she was about to get married 2 years ago, I had planned to pass the throne to her. I didn't expect. A hint of darkness flashed across his face, but it was fleeting. Now that Yu has returned safely, everything will naturally return to the right track. Father's body is weak, and I haven't fully recovered. There are indeed some things that I can't handle. Why don't you officially ascend the throne today? Chu Luiyue was confused. Why did these two people casually push her to the throne with just a few words? This doesn't seem too appropriate. The corners of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. What's inappropriate about it? There are many happy events today, and one more is even better. Taizu waved his hand. Everyone's expression became a little strange when they heard that. Many happy events. Taizu, open your eyes and take a closer look at the mess on the ground. Third Princess Shang Wanwan and her newly married husband, Jiang Yuqing, are still covered in blood at this very moment. With the imperial family's dispute having reached this point, only you can say something like, there will be many happy things to come. The corners of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched, and he couldn't resist the attacks of the two for a moment. Shang Wanyu clenched his fist and coughed. Look at father's body. I have to rest well. Can you bear to let father tire himself out? Chu Luiyue was confused. Weren't you also strategizing when you were lying in bed for 2 years? Well, why don't we clean up this mess first? Chu Luiyue glanced at the two of them and asked. The matter of Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Wanwan hadn't been completely settled yet. That's true, I almost forgot about this. Taizu clapped his hands and immediately looked down. Other than these two, Xiahou Rong and the others just now, who else harmed you back then? Who betrayed you? Today, drag them out and deal with them together. Taizu could be said to be swift and decisive. However, Chu Liuyue's brows furrowed slightly. She had basically investigated what happened back then. However, there were still some questions that she was still puzzled about. For example, why did Jiang Yuqing do this? He clearly didn't like Shang Wanwan, or rather, whoever he liked wouldn't affect any of his decisions at all. In his heart, he only cared about himself. But why was he so painstakingly scheming for Anne? There were so many people back then. Some stood firm for her, some ran for her, and some. Did they really betray her completely? She couldn't help but look in a certain direction. Mu Qinghe stood outside the crowd. His black armor was exceptionally eye-catching. As if sensing her gaze, Mu Qinghe also looked over. Mu Qinghe. Chu Liyue suddenly spoke. Hearing this, everyone quieted down and looked at the two of them curiously and uneasily. Who didn't know that the Deputy General of the Black Cavalry, Mu Qinghe, was personally groomed and promoted by the Empress back then? Something happened to the Empress, but the Black Cavalry didn't react at all. There was something wrong with it. Chu Liyue looked at him with a solemn gaze and asked word by word, "Say it yourself, back then, did you betray me or not?" Digression, thank you for all your rewards and tickets. I'm working hard to write in February. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 895. A clear and powerful voice spread throughout the entire Langkuan Hall. Everyone watched this scene silently and subconsciously held their breaths. It was fine if the others colluded with Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Wanwan to frame the princess. After all, each of them had their own goals. However, Mu Qinghe was different. Everything he had today was thanks to the Empress concubine. Without the princess, there would be no deputy commander of the Black Cavalry, Mu Qinghe. After all, he was once one of the princess's most trusted confidants. If he really betrayed the princess, he would not be able to escape death today. Furthermore, he would suffer thousands of curses after death. But if he didn't? What exactly happened to the princess's death back then? Countless pairs of eyes were focused on Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe raised his head and looked at the woman standing on the 9th step. His mind was in a mess. So, it was really her. No wonder he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity from the first time he saw her in country Yaoqin. Later on, he was even worried about her matters several times. Even though he sensed that she seemed to be overly cold and polite to him, he didn't think too much about it. He thought that it was just because of the similar eyebrows. But in reality, now that he thought about it, it wasn't the appearance that was similar. It was clearly the aura and expression. He glanced sideways at Hong Yao, who was on his shoulder. You already knew, right? Hong Yao's eyes flickered as it buried its head under its wings. Actually, it didn't mean to hide it from him, but, however, Mu Qinghe didn't have any intention of scolding it. Instead, he slowly exhaled. The next moment, he walked forward and stood in the middle. Then, he raised his head slightly again and looked at Chu Liyue, who was standing in front of him. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be gripped by something, and her entire body tensed up. She could treat other people's betrayals as a thing of the past after she took her revenge, but she still felt a little indignant about Mu Qinghe. She didn't understand where the taciturn, stubborn, and loyal Mu Qinghe from back then had gone. So today, she only wanted an answer. She wanted him to say it himself. After a short stalemate, Mu Qinghe suddenly threw the sword in his hand to the side, making a crisp sound. Chu Liyue's eyebrows moved slightly. Then, she saw Mu Qinghe take off the armor on his body. As today was Sheng Wanwan's wedding and ascension ceremony, everything was very grand. Even Mu Qinghe was fully armed and wearing the highest armor of the Black Cavalry's deputy general. At this moment, he took off his black armor. He felt his body, his body, his body, his body. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Then, he knelt down in front of Chu Luiyue. His knee hit the ground with a dull thud. "Your Highness," he suddenly bent down and kowtowed. His forehead was pressed against the cold jade floor. A cold chill almost spread through his entire body. "Mu Qinghe betrayed your Highness and is a vile subject. Your Highness, please kill him." Every single word and sentence was clear as day. No one present expected Mu Qinghe to have such a reaction. He didn't argue, complain, or protest. With just one sentence, he admitted his betrayal so straightforwardly. In the current situation, wasn't he courting death? As long as he said that he didn't betray, or that he was forced, there might be a way out. But, he didn't. If it was 2 years ago, who would have thought that Mu Qinghe, who was the most trusted by the princess, would come to this step today? If he had always been loyal to the princess, after today, when the princess took over the imperial power and ascended to the throne, he would be a first-class meritorious official. Unfortunately, Jiang Yuqing glanced at him, a dark light flashed in his eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. He quickly lowered his eyes, hiding the expression in his eyes. Chu Luiyue looked at Mu Qinghe, who was kneeling below, with a calm and cold gaze. Everyone looked at her. This time, Mu Qinghe should only have a dead end left. In the silence, Chu Luiyue spoke again and asked, "What you said now, is every word true?" "Yes." "No lies, no difficulties?" "No." "Are you willing to die?" Mu Qinghe was still kneeling there. Previously, he had been lowering his head, but when he heard this, he finally straightened up. His face was calm. "Yes. Your Highness, please grant my wish." Every word and sentence indicated that he was ready to die. Chu Luiyue paused, then suddenly smiled. "The last time you asked this consort to grant your wish, it was to go to Dahuang Swamp. At that time, although her status was respected, her power in the imperial court was not stable. Mu Qinghe took the initiative to go to Dahuang Swamp to enlist in the army, to fight for military power for her. At first, she did not agree. Dahuang Swamp was very dangerous. If he went there, he would suffer a lot. More importantly, he might not even be able to keep his life. He was always walking between life and death. If he was not careful, he might stay there forever. However, that was the only time that Mu Qinghe did not listen to her order and knelt outside her palace for a long time. At that time, he also said, "Your Highness, please grant my wish." However, she did not expect to hear these words a few years later. He was actually asking for death. When Mu Qinghe heard this, his heart felt like it was stabbed by something. It was so painful that his body trembled slightly. His expression was gloomy for a moment, but he quickly lowered his head. "Your Highness, please." The remaining 2 words were stuck in his throat and he could not say them. Chu Luiyue looked at him and sighed softly. In that case, before she finished speaking, she suddenly saw Hong Yao, who was on Mu Qinghe's shoulder, flapping its wings anxiously. It flew around Mu Qinghe and got closer from time to time. It let out a rapid chirp as if it was saying something. Or, it was trying to persuade her. However, Mu Qinghe was unmoved. Seeing this, Hong Yao was so anxious that it turned around and flew towards Chu Luiyue. Everyone saw a ball of blue flame streaking across the sky. In the next second, they saw that Mu Qinghe's blue sparrow had already flown in front of Chu Luiyue. It flapped its wings and looked nervously at Chu Luiyue, as if it wanted to say something. It was so anxious that tears kept welling up in its eyes. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat and she reached out her hand. Hong Yao. Before her hand could touch Hong Yao, Mu Qinghe, who was below, suddenly realized something. He straightened up and shouted with a frown, his tone warning. Hong Yao's body trembled slightly, but it still fell into Chu Liuyue's hands. Big drops of tears rolled down, wetting its fluffy feathers and falling into Chu Liuyue's palm, which was slightly hot. Chu Liyue could clearly see that its eyes were filled with grievance and pleading. No, no. At some point, Dumpling had also come out and squatted on Chu Liyue's shoulder, watching this scene. It was rare that it did not make a fuss with Hong Yao this time. After hesitating for a moment, it flew over and circled around Hong Yao, seeming to be at a loss. After a while, it used its head to clumsily and carefully nudged Hong Yao's head. Don't cry. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 896. He was used to Hong Yao's willful and spoiled appearance, but this was the first time he saw Hong Yao like this. Seeing that Hong Yao's tears were still flowing, Dumpling flapped its wings in annoyance and raised its head to look at Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue sighed in his heart and reached out to wipe away Hong Yao's tears. All right, don't cry anymore. I won't kill him. At this moment, everyone was focused on this side. When they heard this, they were all stunned on the spot. What did this mean? The Empress concubine was not going to kill Mu Qinghe because of that cyan sparrow. After a moment, whispers finally came from the crowd. It can't be, the Empress concubine really doesn't plan to kill Mu Qinghe. Just for that cyan sparrow. There's something you don't know. Although that cyan sparrow is Mu Qinghe's contracted magical beast, it was actually raised by the Empress concubine most of the time. I heard that the Empress concubine pampers it as much as her own magical beast. If Mu Qinghe dies, then this cyan sparrow obviously won't be able to live either. I see. But even so, this is. The Empress concubine's contracted magical beast is a mythical beast. Why would she care about this little cyan sparrow? Who can guess the Empress concubine's thoughts? But that Mu Qinghe, her luck is really good. She actually relied on this contracted magical beast to save her life. Most people were shocked by this, but this was the Empress concubine's matter after all. It was her freedom to deal with it however she wanted. Mu Qinghe betrayed her, but she didn't plan to kill her. What qualifications did others have to say? Chu Liyue raised his eyes and looked at Mu Qinghe. From today onwards, Mu Qinghe will be stripped of her position as the deputy commander of the Black Cavalry. She will be grounded in the Mu residence. Without my permission, she is not allowed to leave the residence, and no one is allowed to visit her. Jian Fengqi's hanging heart finally relaxed and he let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, otherwise, he didn't know how to plead for mercy for her, but he also felt that something was wrong. Why did he have to ask for death for no reason? When he had the chance, he still had to go and ask. Mu Qinghe was stunned. He thought that what awaited him was a dead end, but he didn't expect, immediately, a hint of struggle flashed through his eyes, as if he wanted to say something. Your Highness. Take him away. At Chu Liyue's command, a black cavalry immediately stepped forward and suppressed Mu Qinghe. It was a tall and sturdy man. Just now, no one had noticed his existence. Now that he had stood up, everyone was shocked to realize that this person's aura was extremely strong. Mu Qinghe frowned. She turned around and saw a familiar face. It was Lei Laosi. He had unknowingly infiltrated the Black Cavalry without anyone noticing. Yoshii, thank you for your hard work. Chu Liyue said. Mitsui chuckled. With every word that Sheng Guanyu said, Sheng Guanwan's face turned paler. In the end, she knelt on the ground, completely paralyzed, and her face was ashen. This was to completely erase her from the Tianling royal family's records. No. No. Father. She knelt forward, but Elder Chen Ku immediately waved his sleeve and stopped her. How dare you! Shang Wanwan's body flew backward and landed heavily on the ground. She was already injured, and this hit was like a heavy blow to her, causing her to spit out a few mouthfuls of blood. Shang Wanwan raised her hand, wanting to wipe away the blood at the corner of her mouth. When she looked down, the bright red color on her body instantly pierced her eyes. She suddenly remembered that today was her wedding day. She was still wearing the phoenix coronet embroidered with gold. In fact, he was originally only a step away from the emperor's throne. She thought that after today, she would become the most honorable woman in the entire Tianling dynasty. But now, all of that was gone. So many years of hard work had all gone up in smoke overnight. Shang Wanwan's heart was filled with hatred. She was filled with resentment and jealousy, almost burning her up. A black talisman was faintly discernible between her eyebrows. Nothing at all. And that woman, who cares if she's Chu Luiyue or Shang Wanyu? In any case, she had taken everything away from her. Now that she was high and mighty, she was really smug. Shang Wanwan slowly raised her head, stared at Chu Luiyue, and spat out a sentence. What you have is already too much. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She vaguely felt that something was wrong with Shang Wanwan. The next moment, she saw Shang Wanwan's aura suddenly rise. Then, a black blade cut across the sky and went straight for Chu Luiyue. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI Network. Chapter 897. In fact, when they saw Chu Luiyue holding on for a long time, they were relieved and happy. But now... wasn't it too long? This made them worried again. Jian Fengqi glanced at Dumpling beside him, and a sharp light flashed in his icy eyes. He leaned against the stone wall and chuckled. Don't worry. She won't let herself die so easily. Back then, she was framed by Shang Wanwan and Jiang Yuqing. She had chosen to commit suicide, but in the end, she survived and started over again. How could she be so easy to deal with? Let's take advantage of this time to digest all the force that we devoured before. This way, we might not be too far behind her. Otherwise... Jian Fengqi raised his eyebrows. Although he didn't finish his sentence, his meaning was obvious. Yuan Jinghong glanced at him in bewilderment. Are you sure? After all, it's infused with divine power. A pervert will always be a pervert. Jian Fengqi said straightforwardly. He looked at the slender figure on the main peak in the distance and closed his eyes. The force around his body surged. Seeing him like this, the rest of the people looked at each other and had no choice but to suppress their thoughts for the time being. They began to cultivate like Jian Fengqi. No matter what, there were many benefits to increasing one's strength. The few of them temporarily calmed down, but the others around ancient Phoenix Mountain weren't so easy to calm down. They thought that Shang Wanyu wouldn't be able to hold on for long and would be defeated soon. But for some reason, it actually held on for so long. From afar, the endless golden light in the sky surrounded Jun Zhiqing and Shang Wanyu, forming two centers respectively. Although the scale and movements of Shang Wanyu's side could not be compared to Jun Zhiqing's at this time, but compared to the beginning, it was much stronger and was obviously still expanding. Not only was she not at a disadvantage, she even seemed to be catching up. How? How is this possible? Many people had the same question in their hearts as they watched this scene. Chu Luiyue had no idea about the reactions of the outside world. This was because all of her energy was focused on regulating the origin power in her body. A cultivator's body was like a container. Depending on their strength and other aspects, the amount of origin power they could store would also differ greatly. Chu Luiyue was currently peak tier 6. Among cultivators of the same rank, he was absolutely considered one of the best. She had the Daijing Yuan Meridian. At the same time, her physical strength was much stronger than people of the same level. This allowed her to endure the surging origin power with greater endurance and acceptance than others. That was why she was able to hold on until now, exceeding the expectations of Yuan Jinghong and the others. Even so, at the end of the day, she was only at the peak of stage 6. Compared to Jun Zhiqing, the difference was too great. She dared to compete with Jun Zhiqing because the water droplet in her dantian could store an unlimited amount of origin power. However, at the same time, she was faced with a serious problem. Even if the water droplet could store all of the origin power, her body might not be able to withstand the repeated washing and impact of the vigorous origin power. In fact, not long after it started, her body started to hurt all over. Now that an hour had passed, the pain did not lessen. Instead, it became even worse. She even felt that the origin power had turned into sharp blades when it surged into her limbs and bones, ruthlessly scraping through her flesh and bones. The others were far away and could not see that her clothes were already soaked in blood. Even the lower part of her body was dyed red with blood. Compared to Chu Luiyue, Jun Zhiqing's situation was undoubtedly much better. His strength was more than one level higher than Chu Luiyue's, and he had the bloodline of the Dark North royal family. It could be said that he had all the advantages. Even until now, he was still suspended in mid-air and had not been swept down by the terrifying energy. His strength and determination were evident from this. The aura around him was also increasing rapidly with the passage of time. Of course, he could also clearly feel that a small portion of the energy that was supposed to belong to him was diverted halfway and swallowed by another person. He originally thought that it would end soon, but he did not expect it to not stop after so long. Therefore, Jun Zhiqing lowered his eyes and took a look. With this look, he could clearly see Chu Luiyue sitting cross-legged and bathed in blood. A fierce look flashed across his eyes. His body moved and landed not far away from Chu Luiyue. "Do you want to die?" His face was cold and his voice was icy. "In order to defeat I, you are willing to give up your life." Chu Luiyue laughed softly. "You think too much. I am not doing this to defeat you." She was doing this to defeat the remnant consciousness in the divine energy. Since it felt that she was a threat, then she would show it. The red in Jun Zhiqing's eyes grew brighter and brighter, almost as if they were soaked in blood. Then, he laughed coldly. "Based on your current strength, you want to compete with I?" Chu Luiyue slowly turned her head and glanced at him. She was still smiling, but the bright red bloodstain at the corner of her mouth made her smile even more stubborn and tenacious. "Based on my strength, can't." Her voice was very soft, but her tone was still arrogant and proud. It was as if there was nothing in this world that she could not do. Jun Zhiqing put one hand behind his back and slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves. He could roughly guess that she wanted to increase her strength as quickly as possible, but this was too risky. What was it that gave her such confidence? Jun Zhiqing's gaze swept across her pale face and laughed ambiguously. However, there was no smile at the corner of his eyes. "Since you want to compete, I will let you lose completely." After he finished speaking, the force in his body surged and his cultivation level increased again. The golden origin power in the surroundings surged toward him. The golden vortex above Chu Luiyue's head gradually shrank. The force surrounding her also began to rush toward Jun Zhiqing at a speed visible to the naked eye. 9th rank warrior. Sensing this movement, Jian Fengqi opened his eyes and looked over. His expression was slightly serious. No wonder Jun Zhiqing had always been so arrogant in the northern underworld. This talent and strength could indeed be considered top-notch. Moreover, the most important thing was that this might not be his true strength. Seeing that almost all the force was rushing toward him, Chu Luiyue appeared to be particularly weak. This was a battle where the outcome could be seen at a glance. How is that Jun Juqing so strong? Mu Hongyu could not help but stand up with an anxious expression. Actually, your majesty has not suffered a loss. After all, you have devoured a lot of force before. Now, as long as you can return safely, everything else is. Your majesty. Before Yuan Jinghong could finish his words, he suddenly opened his eyes wide in shock. On top of the mountain, an arrow suddenly flew out from the golden light that filled the sky. It went straight for Chu Luyue. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 898. With a clear shout, the dagger in the Lang Kuan palace that was thousands of miles away flew forward and quickly killed the black stream of light. Golden sand and dust flew into the air. The wind howled. Xue Xue, who was following behind Rong Xiu, immediately shrank its neck and retreated. It had finally gotten the chance to take a shower a few days ago and cleaned up. It didn't want to be as sloppy as before. After a while, the surrounding wind and sand gradually calmed down, and the Red Moon Desert seemed to have returned to peace. Only the scorching sun continued to roast the earth, causing it to be scalding hot. Rong Xiu stopped in his tracks and looked up. In the vast desert, there was no one else except him. A childish and cold voice entered his ears. Someone bullied you, Rong Xiu paused, and a golden flame seemed to burn in his eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. It's the Black Demon Cave. Why would the Black Demon Cave find her? This was Lan Zhao's voice. Why didn't they stay in their own territory? Why did they come to Tianling? Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly, and he chuckled. That person's physical body was destroyed a few years ago. Now, only a soul is left, constantly residing in the bodies of cultivators and absorbing their cultivation to maintain its life. Whoosh! The yellow sand in front of him moved, and a blurry figure appeared in the lake. It looked like a 4- or 5-year-old child. You know that person? Dugu Mabao asked. I've met him once. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes, and there was an unfathomable look in his deep phoenix eyes. I just didn't expect him to be so bold now. He even dared to touch you, Lan Xiao said lazily. Who cares why he went to Tianling? If he wants to touch you, he's going against us. Diwu, if I remember correctly, how much friendship do you have with the Black Demon Cave in the past? Don't talk nonsense. Diwu Zhangze immediately denied. I'm not close to them. Lan Xiao chuckled. Not close. If you're not close, why would they pay tribute to you for 10 years? I heard that the gifts they give you every year are piled up. Stop. Diwu Zhangze shouted with a headache. I was wrong, okay. Back then, I only thought that they went to ask for medicine. How would I know what they did in private? What's more, I didn't help them even once. Dugu Mabao said coldly. You didn't help them because you're already trapped in the desert. If Diwu Zhangze hadn't come here, he would have been killed by the Black Demon Caves. Diwu Zhangze. What was this? He really had nothing to do with the Black Demon Cave. He had only agreed to meet them because of their 10 years of hard work. That meeting, he didn't do anything. So many years had passed. Who would have thought that this matter would be brought up again at this time? Then why don't I go find the people from the Black Demon Cave and warn them? Diwu Zhangze asked tentatively. Then, he thought about it and found it strange. Logically speaking, the Black Demon Cave has no reason to bother Tianling. Is it because of something on the girl? She did have a few treasures. That person was expelled from the Black Demon Cave many years ago. Rong Xiu said indifferently. Dugu Mabao and the others were surprised. Expelled. What did he do that even the Black Demon Cave can't tolerate? Dugu Mabao asked immediately. Rong Xiao shook his head. That's what you need to ask that person. Then, he moved his feet, and his figure quickly transformed into several shadows. After about a quarter of an hour, he finally stopped and stood at the center of the Red Moon Desert, beside the Blue Lake. He looked forward and smiled. Now, I've passed the 3 seniors test. According to the agreement, I can leave, right? Dugu Mabao snorted. You could have passed this test long ago. Why do you have to pretend to be troubled? From the strength he displayed at the last moment, it was clear that he had been concealing his strength before this. Rong Xiao smiled, slightly bent down, and politely bowed. He said humbly, actually, I just broke through not too long ago. It's all thanks to the senior's guidance. If not for the fact that I was lucky enough to cross this step, Rong Xiao would have been stuck here for a long time. You're still pretending to be innocent after taking advantage of me. Lan Xiao couldn't help but scold. He wanted to make things difficult for this kid, but he didn't expect that not only did he not make him suffer, he even took the opportunity to help him break through. This was like throwing a rock to smash the other party's head to teach him a lesson, but he didn't expect to throw it right at the other party's feet and become his stepping stone. This feeling was extremely sullen. To think that he thought of so many ways to deal with Rong Xiao, but in the end, it was all for him. Rong Xiao was already immune to such words. From the day he got together with you, they didn't like him. Thus, Rong Xiao had been through a lot and could handle it easily. Also, I didn't take good care of you, and made the seniors worry about her. It's my fault. Dugu Mabao and the others were silent for a moment. Even though they scolded him, they knew how Rong Xiao treated you, If there was any other way, he wouldn't want things to develop to this stage. After a while, ripples appeared on the surface of the water. Dugu Mabao said, you can leave. If the girl gets hurt again, we won't let you off. Rong Xiao cupped his fists. Seniors, take care. I'll take my leave. With that, he finally turned and left. Xue Xue followed closely behind. The figures of a man and a beast soon disappeared into the void. The Red Moon Desert returned to peace again. After some time, Diwu Zhangze asked carefully, if we let him go just like that, then, what should we do next? They couldn't leave the Red Moon Desert and could only come out once a month. What they wanted to do was very limited. You returned to the Imperial capital, but we couldn't help her much. If she can't even deal with those cats and dogs, then we were wrong about her. Dugu Mabao said coldly. That's true, but the girl was bullied. Are we just going to watch? Lan Xiao couldn't listen anymore and retorted disapprovingly. Of course not. Dugu Mabao said slowly. Don't worry, I have my own plans. West Hill, Palace, Langkuan Hall. The dagger flew out and completely strangled that black stream of light. Everything happened in an instant. Chu Luiyue didn't even see the dagger's movements clearly when he heard a shrill and resentful scream. Then, everything in front of him disappeared. That cold and threatening aura was also immediately removed. The totem on the dagger gradually dimmed and disappeared without a trace. Then, it flew back to Chu Luiyue's hand. Chu Luiyue blinked. That aura just now, it was Rong Xiao. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 899. Seeing the last black light escape, Chu Luiyue subconsciously wanted to continue attacking, but Taizu's voice suddenly sounded in her ears. You don't chase a cornered enemy. In just a moment, that thing left decisively. Chu Luiyue looked back strangely, but saw Taizu's expression was still solemn. Is he worried about the so-called Black Demon Cave? As the Empress, she had a basic understanding of the situation on the continent. Outside Heaven's canopy, there were countless small countries like Yaochin. And inside Heaven's canopy, there were mostly powerful existences like the Tianling dynasty. These empires usually had extremely vast territories, and most of them were responsible for guarding Heaven's canopy. They could be said to be huge monsters on the continent. They also had connections and interactions with each other, but they basically didn't interfere with each other. After all, if this level of existence caused trouble, it would be the lives of millions of people. Moreover, empires that could occupy a place in Heaven's canopy all had top-notch experts overseeing them. They couldn't be easily provoked. But Chu Luiyue had never heard of the Black Demon Cave. Taizu seemed to be a little afraid. What exactly was he worried about? But Taizu didn't seem to intend to talk about this in detail in front of everyone. He only gave Chu Luiyue a meaningful look and shook his head slightly. At this moment, a painful groan suddenly came from below. Sheng Wanwan was lying on the ground unknowingly. She was curled up into a ball in extreme pain, and there was a bloodstain that was continuously spreading. At a glance, it was faintly black. Pain. Extreme pain. Her mind was blank, and only the pain that she couldn't escape and couldn't avoid was left. Because that person rushed out of Sheng Wanwan's body without caring about anything, it caused her force to run amok. Now, her flesh and blood were festering, and some even revealed white bones. Her entire body felt like it was being roasted by a raging fire. It also felt like she was being ruthlessly cut by thousands of sharp blades. Sheng Wanwan was in so much pain that she felt dizzy. Today, she finally experienced what it meant to live a life worse than death. Seeing Sheng Wanwan's ghastly appearance, many people's faces revealed shock and disgust. They all retreated, afraid that they would be infected by something. Chu Luiyue looked at this scene coldly. Then, she walked down the steps and stepped in front of Sheng Wanwan. The dragon sword returned to her hand, and the Tianling scepter also quietly followed by her side. Sheng Wanwan heard footsteps and knew that Chu Luiyue had arrived. Her curled up and trembling body finally stopped for a moment, and then she slowly raised her head. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. The scars on Sheng Wanwan's face started to fester one after another as well. Look like a ghost, she to her her to her was to her to the point. To her look to was to look, to her face was like a malicious ghost. She was wearing a bright red wedding dress, so the blood on her body didn't make it obvious. Only the spreading bloodstains on her lower body showed how serious her injuries were at this moment. She raised her head with difficulty and looked at Chu Luiyue. Her eyes were filled with despair and desolation. At this moment, she didn't even have the strength to hate Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue looked at her. What's your relationship with that person just now? Sheng Wanwan opened her mouth. Her voice was weak. You're. Now. You. Kill me. She knew that she wouldn't be able to survive today. That person just now had destroyed the last bit of life in her body. Now, her body was just a broken shell. She would rather die than suffer the disdain, ridicule, and abuse of countless people. However, Chu Luiyue was unmoved. She only bent down and stared into Sheng Wanwan's eyes. Let me ask you. How much do you know about that person just now? Sheng Wanwan dared to be so arrogant because she had the help of that person just now. Speaking of which, she should know the most about that person. Sheng Wanwan laughed at herself. However, before the corners of her mouth could curl up, they drooped down and her face became a little gloomier. Chu Luiyue took a step back and raised her chin. Chi Han, wake her up. A figure walked out from the black cavalry again. It was Chi Han. He walked straight to Sheng Wanwan's side and pulled her hair, forcing her to raise her head. His other hand quickly stuffed a medicinal pill into her mouth. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water, straightforward and decisive. Before Sheng Wanwan could cry out in pain, she felt the warm medicinal effect spread between her chest and abdomen. However, this didn't make her feel happy or relieved. Instead, it triggered a deeper fear. She hurriedly struggled and wanted to spit out the medicinal pill. However, the medicinal pill melted in her mouth and she had already swallowed it. "Now, do you have the strength to speak?" Chu Luiyue asked indifferently. Sheng Wanwan's heart was filled with resentment and fear. She couldn't help but wail. "You! What do you want? I know you hate me. Kill me." She would rather die than suffer the pain of being trampled on and tortured in public. Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. Her eyes were curved, but there was a hint of coldness in the corners of her eyes. "You want to die? How can there be such a good thing?" To be able to die quickly, in a sense, was also a relief. Sheng Wanwan had inflicted so much pain on her. How could she let her off so easily? Back then, she had chosen to commit suicide without hesitation because she couldn't bear the torture from the two of them. However, she didn't intend to give this opportunity to Sheng Wanwan. She blinked, looking at Sheng Wanwan as she said slowly and seriously, "You're right. Don't worry. Even if you don't want to say it now, you will say it sooner or later." Sheng Wanwan shuddered. In an instant, endless fear surged in her heart. I really don't know. I don't know anything." He appeared on his own. I was forced." Chu Luiyue suddenly shook her head. "Don't worry. Think it through and tell me the whole story again. Don't waste my time." Then, she tilted her head slightly and looked at Jiang Yuqing. She shook her head regretfully. "TSK, what a pity. Your husband didn't say a single word of mercy for you from start to finish." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 900. Sheng Wanwan was already numb. Jiang Yuqing did not treat her with sincerity. She was already clear about it. He couldn't wait to push all the blame onto her, so how could he still speak up for her? Now that she thought about it, the years of love she thought were just her own wishful thinking. This wedding ceremony that she had meticulously prepared and looked forward to had finally become a huge joke. Sheng Wanwan closed her eyes in despair. Her tears seemed to have dried up, leaving her heart empty and sorrowful. Immediately, her eyes rolled back, and she fainted. "Take her away and take care of her," Chu Luiyue said indifferently. "Yes." Chi Han hummed in response and quickly dragged Sheng Wanwan away, leaving behind a patch of scarlet bloodstains on the ground, indicating that something had happened here. Everyone looked at this scene in silence, and they all felt sorrow in their hearts. Who would have thought that Sheng Wanwan, who was so proud of her success, would end up like this overnight? From today onwards, the world was going to change completely. From the beginning to the end, there was one person who seemed to be indifferent to this, Jiang Yuqing. Even when he saw his newly married wife reduced to such a state, there was still no expression on his face, as if it had nothing to do with him. Only his blood-stained and empty sleeve reminded people that half of his arm had been chopped off. Chu Luiyue looked at Jiang Yuqing and flipped his wrist. Swoosh! The long yuan sword was pointed forward. The black blade was suffused with a cold light and emitted waves of chilling murderous intent. It was as if it could directly kill Jiang Yuqing in the next moment. "Now, it's your turn. Your Highness." A panicked and sorrowful cry was heard. Immediately, a figure suddenly rushed up from behind and stood in front of Jiang Yuqing. With a plop, he directly knelt on the ground. It was Jiang Lizhua. At this moment, the proud expression on his face had completely disappeared, leaving only a face full of panic. He knelt there and looked up at Chu Luiyue in despair. "Your Highness, please spare Yuqing's life." Chu Luiyue's eyes turned slightly, and he looked at him with amusement. "Grand Tutor Jiang, you should have heard and seen everything that happened just now. How can you still have the nerve to beg for mercy now?" Jiang Yuqing colluded with Sheng Wanwan to poison Imperial father and this consort. Furthermore, he passed down a fake Imperial edict, framed a loyal official, and even attempted to exterminate the entire Chongshu pavilion. Which of these actions wasn't a crime that deserved to be punished? Now, you want this consort to spare him. Where does your confidence come from? Jiang Lizuo was drenched in cold sweat, his complexion pale. How could he not know how serious these sins were? However, Jiang Yuqing was his eldest son and the son he doted on the most. When he saw Jiang Yuqing's arm being chopped off previously, he almost couldn't help but jump out. However, he was also stunned by everything that happened back then, so he forcefully held it in. But hearing Chu Luiyue's meaning now, he clearly wanted Jiang Yuqing's life. How could he sit still? Yuqing. Yuqing has always liked you, so why would he harm you? Sheng Wanwan might hate you, but Yuqing doesn't. There must be a misunderstanding here. 2 years ago, when we were preparing for the wedding, Yuqing personally handled everything in the Jiang residence. He wanted to marry you smoothly more than anyone else, so why would he do those things afterward? Jiang Lizuo knelt on the floor. Your Highness. Yuqing had already mentioned this to me many years ago. He has admired you for many years, so he definitely wouldn't betray you. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly. This means that I remembered wrongly the person who killed me. Jiang Lizuo was stumped. Perhaps he was forced, Grand Tutor Jiang. Chu Luiyue interrupted him with a calm expression. Don't just beg for mercy for your son. You should also beg for your entire Jiang family. Jiang Lizuo was suddenly dazed upon hearing this. What? Jiang Yuqing has committed many crimes. Do you think that the Jiang family can completely wash off all of this? Just the fact that he tried to harm father is enough to wipe out the entire family. You can't even protect yourself now, so why do you still have the energy to beg for mercy for Jiang Yuqing? Chu Luiyue reminded him kindly. If you really want to cry, why don't you cry for your entire Jiang family first? Jiang Lizuo really didn't think of this. Too many things happened today, and the impact was too great, so he didn't think of this at all. When he saw Sheng Wanwan's pitiful appearance earlier, he was afraid that Jiang Yuqing would end up in the same state. Hence, he hurriedly rushed out. But he didn't expect that the entire Jiang family would be implicated by Jiang Yuqing. Chu Luiyue's words were like a blow to the head, and it made Jiang Lizuo suddenly wake up. His dry and pale lips trembled violently, and his eyes were in a daze. Then, immense fear surged out from his eyes. That's right. This is a huge crime that implicates the entire family. If the previous evidence wasn't sufficient, there was still room for rebuttal. But now, the princess and His Majesty have personally stepped forward to prove that the incident back then was indeed Jiang Yuqing's doing. What else is there to argue about? Yuqing. Quickly say something. Jiang Lizuo instinctively looked at Jiang Yuqing. This son has been my pride since he was young, and he is always the most outstanding in all aspects. Later on, he was even more delighted when he agreed on the marriage with the princess. There are so many young talents in the Tianling dynasty, but the princess chose Yuqing. This is something that others can't be envious of. He originally thought that everything would proceed smoothly, but he didn't expect the princess to suddenly die, and the marriage was ruined. Jiang Lizuo was originally very disappointed, but Jiang Yuqing actually gradually became close to Sheng Wanwan again. Moreover, as he had previously helped the princess settle many things, he took the opportunity to take over these matters after the princess died and rapidly became a powerful figure in the entire Tianling dynasty. Regarding this, Jiang Lizhou was naturally happy. He didn't ask anything in detail and only felt that this son was very capable. Thus, he peacefully enjoyed the crowd's admiration and envy. Who would have thought that he actually did all these things in secret? Now that the truth has been revealed, there's no way to avoid it. Not only did the glory and wealth disappear in the blink of an eye, but even the entire Jiang family was implicated. Jiang Yuqing didn't seem to care about Jiang Lizhua's scolding and pleading. He looked at Chu Liyue. Other than the initial shock, his emotions seemed to have calmed down. I didn't expect you to still be alive. Once Jiang Yuqing spoke, Jiang Lizhou instantly slumped to the ground, and his face turned ashen. He admitted it. Chu Liyue's red lips curved up slightly. Yes, I'm still alive. Are you very disappointed? Jiang Yuqing didn't answer her, and his expression became a little strange. That person helped you, right? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 901. That person. Which person? Chu Liyue was taken aback for a moment. Jiang Yuqing looked at her expression and suddenly understood something. It seemed like she still didn't remember. This made his mood a little better. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes, and a guess suddenly surfaced in her mind. Jiang Yuqing seemed to know about her memory loss. But just as she was about to ask, Jiang Yuqing's figure suddenly moved, and he quickly went forward. He was at the peak of Tier 7. Even though he was injured, the power that burst out in an instant was still not to be underestimated. A silver light flashed past. It was him who had summoned his own long sword, and was about to clash with the Long Yuan sword. A murderous intent flashed past Chu Liyue's eyes, and she raised her wrist. Clang! The two long swords collided fiercely. Crack! A crisp shattering sound was heard. Jiang Yuqing's sword was directly split into two from the middle by the Long Yuan sword. This sword was actually a Yuan instrument that Jiang Yuqing had collected, and it could be considered an excellent sword. Unfortunately, compared to the Long Yuan sword, it was far inferior and was directly broken in one exchange. However, Jiang Yuqing's face didn't show any signs of panic. Instead, he took advantage of the moment when the long sword was broken to quickly step forward. He directly grabbed Chu Liyue's neck with one hand. Chu Liyue could clearly see that a purplish-black mark seemed to appear on his hand. A dangerous aura was rapidly approaching. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Yuqing was already half a step away from Chu Liyue. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. He had already reached this step, but he still hadn't given up and instead chose to directly attack the princess. The Long Yuan sword's power was indeed extremely strong, but Jiang Yuqing's attack came too quickly. It was also too sudden. Your Highness. Worried voices sounded from all around. However, the time was too short, and the bystanders didn't have time to help. Jiang Yuqing's hand was about to choke Chu Liyue's neck. Chu Liyue tiptoed and quickly dodged. At the same time, a transparent flame suddenly gushed out from her palm and quickly wrapped around her body. The blazing heat caused Jiang Yuqing's eyebrows to fiercely jump. Seeing the transparent flames on Chu Liyue's body, that familiar burning sensation suddenly came. While he was distracted, Chu Liyue had already dodged his attack. She lifted her leg and kicked out, sending Jiang Yuqing flying. Crack! The sound of his sternum breaking was exceptionally clear. Bang! Jiang Yuqing crashed to the ground. He was already injured, and now that he was hit by Chu Liyue, his injuries were even worse. However, he couldn't care less about his injuries. He struggled to look at Chu Luyue in shock. You were the one who attacked me that day. You are the disguised Shamu. He didn't feel it before, but now that he was in close combat, he suddenly realized that ruthless and straightforward figure was too familiar. Chu Luyue curled her lips into a smile. You guessed right. A strong sense of uneasiness surged in Jiang Yuqing's heart. He reached out to touch his chest, as if wanting to take something out. However, Chu Luyue didn't give him the chance. She stared intently at Jiang Yuqing and shouted clearly. Explode! As soon as she finished speaking, Jiang Yuqing felt as if a flame had suddenly surged into his energy center. It was extremely painful. Previously, his lower abdomen had been aching from time to time, but he didn't take it to heart. Now, he was shocked to realize that this energy had actually burned into his energy center. No, as soon as he spoke, he felt a crazy and terrifying energy explode in his energy center. Boom! His core of essence shattered. His energy center was destroyed. The intense pain caused Jiang Yuqing's vision to turn white. He almost fainted. The force that he had used all kinds of methods to store began to run wildly because he lost control. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before anyone could react, Jiang Yuqing was already lying on the ground, covered in blood and in a sorry state. A fist-sized bloody hole appeared in his lower abdomen. The muscles all over his body had also cracked to varying degrees due to the impact of the force in his body. Bloody scars covered his body, looking extremely terrifying. Jiang Yuqing was already unconscious. Blood splattered into his eyes, making his vision blood red. He lay on the ground, unable to tell which part of his body hurt more. So, it really was her. From then on, no. Perhaps even before that, she had already planned all of this. The transparent flame quickly spread around Jiang Yuqing's body. Chu Luyue looked down at him and tilted her head. How does this feel? They should also experience the bone-piercing pain that she had experienced back then. Jiang Yuqing wanted to use his force to form a barrier to defend against the attack of the transparent flame. However, this fire seed had been hiding in his body for a long time and had directly erupted from the inside out. How could he defend against it? In addition to the damage to his core of essence, he was no different from a cripple now. Jiang Lizhou watched this scene from the side, his heart aching to the extreme. But just now, everyone had clearly seen that it was Jiang Yuqing who took the initiative to attack the Empress concubine. In this situation, even death could not wipe out his crimes. How could he dare to plead for leniency or say another word? Jiang Lizhou was in a daze. Thinking that the entire Jiang family would be completely finished from now on, his heart was filled with grief. His blood and qi churned, and his eyes rolled back as he fainted. The black cavalry immediately came forward and brought him away. The scene in front of him was extremely chaotic, but to a certain extent, it was also orderly. Anyone with discerning eyes could see that the Empress concubine's people had already made complete preparations. Everything that happened today was under her control. Jiang Yuqing rolled on the ground in agony, trying to extinguish the flames on his body. But how could the karmic fire consecrated in the heavenly square cauldron be so easily extinguished? Jiang Yuqing could even hear the sizzling sounds coming from the blood stains on his body as they burned. His skin, flesh, blood, and bones were all being tortured horribly. Finally, Jiang Yuqing spat out a few words with difficulty. If you want to kill me, just do it. Chu Luyue suddenly waved her hand. The transparent flame seemed to have received some kind of order and quickly gathered, finally forming a small ball. Then, it rose into the air and jumped onto Chu Luyue's palm. If one didn't look carefully, it was really hard to recognize the transparent flame that jumped like a fairy. Then, Chu Luyue raised her sword and with a flick of the sword, she cut a bloody wound on Jiang Yuqing's chest. Without waiting for Jiang Yuqing to react, she flicked her finger and planted the flame into Jiang Yuqing's heart. Don't worry, I can't bear to kill you now. Chu Luyue curved her lips into a smile. In the future, with this flame accompanying you, you shouldn't be lonely. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 902. From now on, Jiang Yuqing would suffer endless heart-burning pain day and night. His pill of essence had been destroyed, so he could only passively endure this kind of torture. She had said that she would make these people pay back the pain she had suffered 1,000 times over. And today was just the beginning. Jiang Yuqing seemed to want to say something, but the intense pain forced him to curl up and struggle. He lay on the ground, covered in blood, as lowly as an ant. Who would have thought that the high and mighty Jiang Yuqing would end up in such a state? Chu Luyue looked away, raised her head slightly, and wanted to walk forward. Her feet were stained with blood, and every step she took left a bloody footprint. It was a ghastly sight. Countless gazes were focused on her. She was slender and had thin shoulders, but her aura was stern and majestic, and she was unstoppable. She walked step by step to the top of the 9 steps and looked at Sheng Wanyu. Father, I didn't discuss today's matter with you. I hope you can forgive me. Although Qi Han and Jian Fengqi had teamed up previously, and they had vaguely guessed something, she didn't tell anyone what happened afterward. Sheng Wanyu shook his head and raised his hand. The Tianling scepter seemed to be summoned and flew into his hand. The next moment, Sheng Wanyu handed the Tianling scepter to Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue was slightly shocked. Today, I officially pass the throne of the Tianling dynasty to you. From today onwards, you are the new emperor of Tianling. Chu Luyue opened her mouth, but Sheng Wanyu continued. From now on, you can do whatever you want. No one in the world can hurt you anymore. Originally, this position belonged to her. No one in the entire Tianling dynasty was more suitable than her. After Sheng Wanyu knew what had happened back then, he was actually very regretful. If he had passed the throne to her earlier, Sheng Wanwan and the others wouldn't have been able to covet it, and perhaps there wouldn't have been so much trouble later. Now that she had finally returned safely, and with Taizu's help, everything was logical. Seeing the pity in Sheng Wanyu's eyes, Chu Luyue felt a surge of warmth in her heart, and tears welled up in her eyes. She paused and finally took the Tianling scepter with both hands. In an instant, the Tianling scepter emitted a dazzling light that shot into the sky. The pressure was immense. The officials knelt down. Congratulations to the crown princess on the throne. Amidst the blood, that woman had stepped through life and death to return once more. Chu Luyue's chest seemed to be filled with excitement. Now, I'm the crown emperor. Today was supposed to be the day of the third princess, Sheng Wanwan's wedding and coronation. However, when the news came out of the palace, everyone was shocked. In an instant, it caused a huge uproar in the entire West Hill. It turns out that the princess died back then because Sheng Wanwan and Jiang Yuqing colluded to frame her. They were the reason why the emperor was unconscious for 2 years. Jiang Yuqing was the mastermind behind the destruction of the Chongshu pavilion overnight. More importantly, the crown princess didn't die. After exposing the crimes they had committed back then, the situation in the entire Tianling dynasty changed drastically. The Xiaohou residents and Jiang residents were executed. Sheng Wanwan and Jiang Yuqing's cultivation bases were crippled, their bones broken, and they were imprisoned. The deputy general of the Black Cavalry, Mu Qinghe, was demoted and placed under house arrest in the Mu residence. Other than that, many people were implicated and were completely dealt with together. It could be said that after this battle, half of the Tianling imperial court was bathed in blood. On the same day, the crown princess was officially registered as the empress. Overnight, the situation in the Tianling dynasty changed. Because of these things, the outside world was in an uproar. However, because the crown princess had an extremely high prestige in the Tianling dynasty, after knowing the truth, everyone quickly chose to accept it. In fact, most people thought that the crown princess was much better than Shang Wanwan to be able to return and ascend to the throne. However, they didn't expect that Chu Luiyue was actually the crown princess. Because of this, it wasn't that no one questioned her bloodline, but because Taizu had already appeared, no one dared to say anything. The entire Tianling dynasty was created by Taizu, so who dared to refute his words? Therefore, after a lot of trouble, there weren't any objections, and all kinds of disputes quickly subsided. As for the matter of Shang Wanwan and Jiang Yuqing colluding to harm the crown princess, it attracted many people's reprimand and insults. Of course, Shang Wanwan and Jiang Yuqing wouldn't know about this. Shang Wanwan was placed under house arrest in Huayang Palace, and Jiang Yuqing. After seeing the Jiang family being executed with his own eyes the next day, he was also detained in Huayang Palace, but he didn't live in the same room as Shang Wanwan. After all, they were husband and wife. Chu Luiyue felt that it wasn't good to break them up. It was quite good to become a pair of distressed mandarin ducks. The handling of the various people in the palace took a full 3 days. The thick smell of blood was everywhere, and it didn't completely dissipate until a few days later. However, Chu Luiyue left these matters to the 13th Palace, and she quickly took over many of the matters in the imperial court. Because the changes were too big and involved a lot of people, there were many things that she needed to deal with personally. Fortunately, she was used to doing these things in the past, so it wasn't difficult for her to get started now. Soon, she tidied up everything. On this day, she finally heaved a sigh of relief after reviewing the last bit of memorials. Just as she was about to go out, she happened to see Shang Wanyu pacing back and forth outside the door, as if he was hesitating about something. "Father, why are you here?" Shang Wanyu turned around when he heard the voice. After a few days of rest, Shang Wanyu's complexion was much better. However, he seemed to be a little hesitant. "That Imperial father has something to ask you." "Father, just say it." Chu Luiyue smiled. "What's the matter that made father react like this?" Logically speaking, he shouldn't have anything to worry about now. Shang Wanyu coughed and carefully glanced at Chu Luiyue. He hesitated for a moment before he finally asked. After hesitating for a while, he finally said, "This. I heard that you already has a fiancé in country Yaoqin." Digression, a crippled February floated by. Update at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 903. Chu Luiyue didn't expect her father to come here for this matter. She couldn't help but smile and nod. Yes. Where did Imperial father hear this news? Shang Wanyu didn't expect her to admit it so frankly. He was slightly surprised. "Oh, I happened to have a chat with Elder Song the day before. Everyone in the Chongshu Pavilion knew of Rongxiu's existence. After all, they had visited him in person and given him a lot of gifts. It was difficult to forget." Chu Luiyue had been busy dealing with the affairs of the imperial court these days and hadn't had time to have a good chat with Yuqi Song and the others. She didn't intend to hide it, so she nodded. "I see. I didn't want to hide this from you, but I've been too busy recently, so I didn't have time to tell you." Shang Wanyu felt a little relieved. Looking at his daughter's frankness, it should be okay. "Then, how is he?" "I heard that he is the prince of Yaoqin, called Rongxiu, right? How old is he this year? How is his cultivation? Most importantly, how does he treat you?" Shang Wanyu couldn't hold back and asked all the questions in his heart. Chu Luiyue glanced at him faintly. Father, you didn't come here today to see me, but to ask about Rongxiu, right? Sheng Guanyu was embarrassed for a moment when his thoughts were exposed. However, this was related to his favorite daughter's marriage after all, so he was naturally cautious and cautious. Ahem. You can say that. After all, he is your fiancé, but I haven't even seen him yet. With Jiang Yuqing as an example, Sheng Guanyu was now like a frightened bird. He was afraid that Chu Luiyue would encounter a bad person again. What happened 2 years ago, he didn't want it to happen again. Chu Luiyue saw that although he pretended to be calm, his eyes were full of nervousness and worry. How could she not know what he was thinking? She felt a little warm in her heart. Her red lips curled up and she nodded seriously. He is very good, and he treats me very well. Sheng Guanyu carefully observed her expression. When she mentioned Rongxiu, she looked calm, her eyes were bright, and there was a spring breeze between her eyebrows. That was clearly the expression of someone who liked someone very much. He had never seen such an expression on her face before. Even in the past, when she took the initiative to come and say that she wanted to set up a marriage contract with Jiang Yuqing, he didn't. After all, Sheng Guanyu had lived for half his life, and as an emperor, he was very good at guessing people's hearts. With one look, I can tell that my precious daughter has feelings for Rongxiu. Sheng Guanyu breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, but there was also a faint trace of worry. On one hand, he had always been worried that after experiencing the double betrayal of Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Guanwan, Yu's mental defense would greatly increase and she would reject everyone. On the other hand, he was also afraid that this Rongxiu might not be able to give you the best happiness. She had already suffered too much. He didn't want her to suffer even a little more pain. In that case, now that many things in West Hill have been solved, why don't we find a time to invite him to West Hill? Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly. It was normal for his father to want to see his son-in-law. Okay. After all, it was not the first time he had been here. Now that the dust had settled, it was time for her to tell him her true identity. Hearing Chu Luiyue's words, Sheng Guanyu nodded, but still seemed to be a little hesitant. Chu Luiyue came closer with some doubts. Father, what else do you want to ask? Sheng Guanyu immediately denied. No. Chu Luiyue looked at him lazily, with a face full of understanding. Sheng Guanyu was a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a while, he asked in a low voice, in fact, it's not a big deal, but I just heard that Rongxiu doesn't seem to be in good health. Chu Luiyue almost burst out laughing. You haven't been here for a few days. Have you secretly investigated Rongxiu's background? Sheng Guanyu was exposed in front of him, and he was embarrassed and blushed. I'm also worried about you, so I asked in private. Country Yaoqin was far away from heaven's canopy, but Sheng Guanyu could still inquire about some relevant information. However, what he heard didn't make him feel at ease. Everything else was fine, but his physique seemed to be a disease in his mother's womb, and he had never been in good health. Sheng Guanyu couldn't help but feel worried. Chu Luiyue finally couldn't help but laugh, and his eyes curved. Don't worry, his talent and cultivation are not inferior to mine. In fact, he is even stronger than mine. Everything else was just a rumor. Sheng Guanyu was shocked at first, but then he frowned slightly and didn't seem to believe it. Even if you want to speak up for him, you don't have to be so exaggerated. Even in the entire West Hill, there might not be anyone more outstanding than you, let alone Country Yaoqin. It wasn't that he looked down on Country Yaoqin, but compared to the Tianling dynasty, it was indeed very small. Chu Luiyue shook his head and said sincerely, if you don't believe me, you will naturally know when he comes. In fact, she and Rongxiu did have some unknown issues between them. For example, her identity as the crown princess, and his identity as the son of God. Seeing how confident Chu Luiyue was, Shang Guanyu was skeptical, but he still nodded in agreement. Don't worry. As long as he is as outstanding as you say, I will definitely support you. As for the rest, you don't have to worry about it. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. Rest? What rest? Shang Guanyu's eyelids twitched, and he said vaguely, no. Nothing, Ahem, just. You see, now that you have returned safely and directly become the emperor, the courtiers are quite concerned about your marriage. Shang Guanyu glanced at her carefully. Well. You also know that many young talents in West Hill City are. Lord Zhao's second son hasn't married because of you. And the Sun family has been asking to see you for a few days. Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched fiercely. What the hell is going on? I haven't even settled down on the throne, and they are already putting my marriage on the agenda. But there's no need to be so anxious. How can there be no hurry? There are so many emperors in the Tianling dynasty, and most of them were already married when they ascended to the throne. Some of them were married on the day they ascended to the throne, and the worst ones were also engaged. Only you. Now that you are engaged, they don't know much about it, but even if they know. Shang Guanyu didn't finish his words, but Chu Luiyue knew what he meant. Even if they knew that she was engaged to Rong Xiu, they probably wouldn't like her. Born in a small empire outside heaven's canopy, even if he was a prince, in their eyes, he was definitely not worthy of Chu Luiyue, who was now the emperor of Tianling. At the same time, in the Pingliang Square outside West Hill City, a tall figure had just walked out of the transmission array. He was wearing a hood, and his face was hidden, so no one could see him clearly. There were people coming and going around, but not many people paid attention to him. He looked up at the majestic and quaint West Hill City in front of him and suddenly sneezed. Rong Xiu rubbed his nose and murmured in a low voice. His nasal voice sounded particularly lazy. Who is scolding me? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 904. Chu Luiyue, who was still in the palace, did not know about the news of Rong Xiu's arrival in the West Hill. After comforting her father with great difficulty, she went straight to the Huayang Palace. The once bustling Huayang Palace was now deserted. Apart from the Black Cavalry, who were strictly guarding the inside and outside, there was not even a palace servant to serve. Chu Luiyue walked straight into the main hall of the Huayang Palace. After entering the room, she was hit by an unpleasant smell. The whole room was a mess and extremely dirty. And in the pile of rubbish, she could barely see a person lying down. It was Shang Guanwan. Because there was no one to take care of her injuries, they repeatedly festered and festered. But every day, Qi Han would specially come over and feed her an elixir to keep her alive. In this way, she could not die or fall into a coma. She could only bear this terrible torture with a clear mind. There was no distinction between day and night, and there was no end to it. Hearing the sound, Shang Guanwan thought that Qi Han had come, and she did not move. Anyway, she did not have the strength to struggle. She could only live like this every day. After these few days of torment, she no longer had any thoughts in her heart. Her only thought was that she would be lucky one day and die directly. Looks like you're doing well. A familiar voice sounded. Shang Guanwan was shocked. She looked up in horror and realized that the person who came was actually Chu Luiyue. Today, she was wearing a simple and elegant white dress. Her black hair was like clouds, and she only wore a peach blossom hairpin on her head. At a glance, she looked pure and noble. She was lovely and moving. Who would have thought that such a person would use such cruel means to force her, Shang Guanwan, into such a hopeless situation? The surrounding filth seemed to have nothing to do with her. She stood there as if she was high and mighty. Sheng Wanwan knew that she was back. She was really back. What are you doing here? Sheng Wanwan struggled to spit out a sentence, but it was weak. Chu Luiyue smiled faintly. This consort is here to ask you, who exactly was the soul that escaped that day? What was its relationship with you, and how much did it help you? Sheng Wanwan was silent for a while. I can tell you, but, if I do, you have to promise me that you'll kill me. She really couldn't continue living like this. Chu Luiyue raised her brows, and a smile appeared in her eyes. Do you think you still have the qualifications to negotiate with me? If you want to say it, then say it. If you don't want to say it, I have plenty of time to wait. After saying that, she turned around, as if intending to leave just like that. Seeing how straightforward she was, Sheng Wanwan also panicked. Wait. I'll talk. I'll tell you now. As if she was afraid that Chu Luiyue would go back on his word, she took a deep breath and said everything she wanted to say. I also don't know when that person appeared in my body. I also don't know who he is. All these years, he was the one who instigated me to do those things. Back then, he was also the one who hinted to me to harm you. And the method to repair your Yuan meridian. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes and thought for a moment. Back then, when you attacked those people in Dahuang Swamp, he was the one who taught you. Yes. Yes. In that case, he was already hostile to me, so he manipulated you to do those things. That's right. If it wasn't for him, I definitely wouldn't have the guts. I swear. Chu Luiyue paused for a moment as many thoughts flashed through her mind. Seeing Sheng Wanwan like this, what she said should be true. She had deliberately locked her up and left her out for a few days to torture her. On one hand, she wanted her to repay the debt from back then. On the other hand, she wanted to push her to the brink of collapse so that she would tell the truth. At this point, there was no need for her to lie. It seemed that she wouldn't be able to get anything out of her in this regard. Chu Luiyue was a little disappointed. That person was very powerful. It was also within her expectations that Sheng Wanwan would be controlled by him. Perhaps she didn't know that person as well as the Taizu did. Was it your idea to attack me, or Jiang Yuqing's? Chu Luiyue changed the question. It was his idea. He came to me of his own accord and said that he liked me, and said that he wanted to be with me forever. Sheng Wanwan's voice gradually trembled as she spoke. She felt like a fool who had been played in the palm of Jiang Yuqing's hand without realizing it. Unfortunately, back then, she had secretly given her heart to Jiang Yuqing. How could she tell the truth from a lie? When he came to me, he had already started to poison you. From the beginning to the end, the one who wanted to kill you was Jiang Yuqing. Although I hate you, I don't have the means or the guts to do it. Speaking of which, I'm just his assistant at best. If you want to take revenge, just go and find him. With that said, Sheng Wanwan laughed at herself. It's ridiculous to say that in his study, there is a portrait of you from 10 years ago. From the day you became of marriageable age, he liked you. But in the end, didn't he still try to kill you? Chu Luiyue didn't say anything. She couldn't bear Jiang Yuqing's so-called love. But as for why he did this, she was afraid that she would have to find him and ask him personally to know. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue turned around and left. Sheng Wanwan hurriedly called out to her, wanting her to end herself, but Chu Luiyue's figure had already disappeared. In the end, Sheng Wanwan's voice was so hoarse that it almost bled. Gradually, she fainted again. Not long after, Chi Han came over and woke her up again. She had to endure the pain and torture that seemed to never stop. Chu Luiyue didn't care about everything that happened in the main hall. The 13th Yu had been by her side for a long time, so she naturally helped her take care of many things. After leaving the door, she turned around and entered the side hall. Jiang Yuqing was among them. His situation wasn't much better than Sheng Wanwan's. But his mental state was much better than Sheng Wanwan's. Hearing the sound, he slowly turned his head. Seeing that familiar yet strange face, his heart moved slightly, and a wave of emotion rose in his eyes. Chu Luiyue didn't dress up today, but after regaining her identity, she didn't hide her aura anymore, adding a bit of coldness and nobility. Even if she was only wearing a simple long dress, she was still so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off her. Jiang Yuqing didn't know if it was an illusion, but he vaguely felt that Chu Luiyue seemed to be more and more similar to the Shang Wanyu of the past. In the past, there were only 20% of her facial features and 30% of her expression, so there was a total of 50% similarity. But now, the girl's gradually opened appearance had 70% of the charm of the past. Especially when Shang Wanyu was the same age back then, it was as if they were carved out of the same mold. In this world, could there really be two people who looked so similar? Or was it because the core inside had changed, so they were more similar? Chu Luiyue didn't know what he was thinking at this time, so she went straight to the point. I'm here today to ask you something. Did I ever tell you to cancel the engagement? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 905. Jiang Yuqing's pupils constricted, and a glimmer of light flashed across his eyes. After a moment, he said, "No." Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Actually, on the night she revealed her identity and officially ascended the throne, she had a very long dream. The entire dream was fragmented, with only a few incoherent fragments. After waking up, she had forgotten most of it, only vaguely remembering a few scenes. Other than the octagonal pavilion by the cliff that she had seen at the beginning, there were many unfamiliar scenes in the dream. She had never been to those places, but for some reason, they felt very familiar. More importantly, she remembered the details of some of the scenes clearly. It was as if she had seen them before. After waking up, she tried to draw these scenes, but as soon as she picked up the brush, she almost completely forgot. She couldn't even draw a blurry outline. Other than the octagonal pavilion on the cliff, everything else became blurry. Other than that, the clearest was Thousand View Garden. She dreamed that she was standing by the lake, and Jiang Yuqing was standing in front of her. She seemed to have said something, and there were a few sensitive words. Engagement, cancellation, agreement. After waking up, Chu Luiyue thought for a long time. She felt that this dream wasn't completely a dream. There were many things in it that might be related to the part of her memories that she had lost. If all of that really happened before. I guessed that I went to find Jiang Yuqing back then to cancel the marriage agreement. After waiting for a few days, she finally came here to see him and asked this question. But she didn't expect Jiang Yuqing to say that he didn't. Chu Luiyue didn't quite believe it. Really? Jiang Yuqing looked at her doubtful expression, and for some reason, a subtle smile suddenly appeared on his face. Now that things have come to this, why would I lie to you about such things? Back then, she indeed didn't mention canceling the engagement. Because at that time, they had just agreed to pick a time to set the engagement, but before they could do it, she found him again and proposed canceling the engagement. Because she said that she had someone she liked. But in the end, the engagement was still set. But that was in the future. For her to ask such a question, it was obvious that she couldn't remember what had happened back then at all. Jiang Yuqing didn't intend to explain, nor was he interested in repeating what had happened back then. After all, in his opinion, those experiences weren't worth recalling or remembering. Chu Luiyue stared at Jiang Yuqing, repeatedly thinking about the truth of his words. Yesterday, the Jiang family's residence was sealed. She suddenly changed the topic. Jiang Yuqing's face froze for a moment, but it was gone in the blink of an eye. Only a faint redness could be seen in his eyes. But his overall expression, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. In fact, he had already expected all of this from the moment he was escorted to watch the beheading of the Jiang clan 2 days ago. Or rather, from the day he decided to make a move on her, he had thought of such a situation. However, in the past, he had always been confident and thought that he would never fail. What was even more unexpected was that she actually came back alive. They all died because of you. Chu Luiyue looked at him. Your sister, Jiang Yuji, was still calling your name before she died. You should have heard it, right? The veins on Jiang Yuqing's forehead throbbed. Of course he heard it, and he heard it clearly. At that time, blood flowed all over the ground. The originally lively lives were all gone in the blink of an eye, leaving behind a scene of devastation. Jiang Yuqing slowly closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the emotions in his eyes had completely dissipated, leaving only coldness. The winner is king, and the loser is a bandit. This is your revenge on me. I'll just accept it. No matter how much he begged for mercy or tried to save himself, he was powerless to change the situation. Usurping the throne and committing all kinds of crimes. Not to mention Chu Luiyue, anyone related to this would not let him off easily. Moreover, his pill of essence was shattered, and he was covered in wounds. He was worse than an ordinary person. What else could he do except for anger and grief? However, all of this was actually useless. It would only cause him more pain. After becoming numb, he felt much better. Chu Luiyue smiled. Jiang Yuqing was rather open-minded. Or rather, he was cold and selfish enough. It was clearly because of him that thousands of people in the Jiang family were implicated. However, in the end, he didn't seem to have any remorse. That was because he didn't care about those people at all. Even if they were his parents and his biological sister, he still cared about himself the most, even though he felt a little heartache for them. If someone else was involved in this matter, they would have committed suicide long ago because they couldn't bear the pressure of self-blame and guilt. However, Jiang Yuqing didn't. From this perspective, he was indeed someone important. If he didn't have some temperament and capabilities, how could he have made all the preparations silently back then and betrayed me in one fell swoop? I found this in your study room. Chu Luiyue suddenly took out a rectangular wooden box. As he was worried that the Jiang family might have left something dangerous behind, Qin Yi also went with them during the search. After that, he sent this over. Upon seeing the wooden box, Jiang Yuqing's expression cracked for a moment. Chu Luiyue glanced at him, opened the wooden box, and took out a painting. With a light flick of his wrist, the painting instantly unfurled. There was a woman drawn on it. It was Shengguan Yu back then. Chu Luiyue was also a little shocked when he saw this painting. From the looks of this painting and the signature on it, it was drawn by Jiang Yuqing on the day of her coming-of-age ceremony back then. Previously, Shengguan Wan mentioned that Jiang Yuqing had missed her for 10 years. This was probably what she was referring to. Chu Luiyue half smiled. I didn't know that you would actually leave such a painting behind after what you did to me back then. Jiang Yuqing's face turned pale for a moment as if someone had exposed his long-buried secret. A trace of embarrassment flashed across his eyes. He admitted that he liked her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to that marriage agreement back then. However, for some reason, this painting made him very embarrassed when she suddenly took it out like this. Don't worry. I'm not interested in your yearning for the past 10 years. Chu Luiyue spoke lazily, but his gaze was as sharp as a knife. What this consort wants to ask is, when exactly and why did you decide to betray this consort? In this world, there's no such thing as love or hatred for no reason. Chu Luiyue didn't really believe that Jiang Yuqing did this for the sake of the throne. If he married her, he would still be able to obtain the power he wanted. The more he liked her back then, the more it showed that this betrayal was filled with shocking temptation. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI. Net. Chapter 906. In the face of Chu Liuyue's questioning, Jiang Yuqing chose to remain silent. His mouth was tightly shut, and he refused to say anything. He even shifted his gaze and turned around, as if he didn't intend to continue chatting with Chu Liyue. Snap! Chu Liyue snapped her fingers. A cluster of crimson flames rose from between his fingers, and the painting was instantly set ablaze. Jiang Yuqing heard the commotion and suddenly turned around. When he saw this scene, the veins on his forehead throbbed fiercely. Since you refuse to speak, then there's no need to continue chatting. As for this painting, you should have burned it on the day you decided to kill this consort. Chu Liyue's tone was cold and resolute. Seeing this painting would only make her feel more disgusted. Who was he pretending to be infatuated with her all these years? If he still had the slightest bit of sincerity, he wouldn't have done those things back then. Absurd, laughable. The painting was quickly devoured by the flames, and finally turned to ashes. When the last bit of starlight was extinguished, Jiang Yuqing's face flickered for a moment. He seemed to want to snatch the painting, but in the end, he didn't do anything. Chu Liyue gave him a meaningful look, then turned and left. After her figure disappeared, the room once again regained its deathly silence. Not long after, there was a burst of mournful and tragic cries coming from the main hall next to them. A trace of disgust appeared on Jiang Yuqing's face. It was Sheng Wanwan's cry, as if it was time for her to be tortured again. Almost every day, there would be such a cry. Without looking, it wasn't hard to imagine what kind of terrible pain the owner of this voice was going through. Jiang Yuqing suddenly felt a burning pain in his heart. His face paled, and he slowly bent over. After dealing with these matters, Chu Liyue planned to return to Zhaoyu Hall first. Although her status was different from before, she still lived in her previous palace. Just as she reached the entrance of Zhaoyu Hall, she saw a familiar figure. Cheng Wanzhou. He seemed to be waiting for her. When he heard her footsteps, he raised his head and looked over. Chu Liyue was a little surprised and walked over. Xiaozhou, why are you back so soon? Previously, she had asked Cheng Wanzhou to do her a favor, to return to country Yaoqin and bring Chu Ning over. When she left Yaoqin, Chu Ning only knew that she came to the Tianling dynasty with Mu Qinghe, but she didn't know that she came back for revenge. Naturally, she didn't know her true identity either. Now that the dust had settled, she planned to invite Chu Ning over for a reunion and tell him the truth. The previous Chu Liyue was already dead, and the one living in this body had long been replaced by her. Even though it was too cruel for a father to say this, it was unavoidable. Now that she had regained her identity in Tianling, she could no longer pretend to be Chu Liyue. She had already thought it through. As long as Chu Ning was willing, she would be his daughter for the rest of her life. Whether he wanted to stay in Xiling or return to Yaoqin in the end, she would respect his choice and do her best to accompany and take care of him. After her rebirth, although she had only been with Chu Ning for less than a year, she had long regarded Chu Ning as her real father. Chu Liyue only realized that Cheng Wanzhou's expression was a little strange when she walked up to him. She suddenly felt a sense of unease. Then, she heard Cheng Wanzhou say, "Lord Chu Ning is missing." There was dead silence in the study of Zhaoyu Hall. Chu Liyue sat at the head of the table while Cheng Wanzhou stood 5 steps in front of her. The air was so cold that it seemed to be freezing inch by inch. In that case, he was already missing when you arrived at the Imperial capital of Yaoqin. Cheng Wanzhou nodded. Yes. I asked around, and they all said that Lord Chu Ning went to Tianling alone a month ago. They said that he received your letter. I heard that many people were envious. However, I went to Heaven's Canopy to check, and there was no trace of Lord Chu Ning. Although Chang Wanzhou had never seen Chu Ning before, Chu Luiyue had drawn a portrait for him long ago. As long as he saw him, he would definitely recognize him at a glance. Moreover, he was powerful and agile. He also had many trump cards. Even if he acted alone, Chu Luiyue could rest assured. She thought that everything was arranged properly, but she never expected that Chu Ning was no longer in Yaoqin. I never wrote a letter to father asking him to come to Xiling. Chu Luiyue's face was cold as if covered with a thin layer of frost. If this rumor was true, then who was the one who sent the letter to him? If this rumor was false, it would be even more troublesome. It meant that they didn't even know where Chu Ning went. The world was so big. Finding a person was like finding a needle in a haystack. Chu Luiyue frowned, and her mind raced. Call Qi Han over. The moment Qi Han entered the room, he felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. Your Highness. He cupped his fists and bowed respectfully. Chu Luiyue didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, Qi Han, you've been in charge of the letters between father and I, right? Qi Han was stunned and immediately said, yes. Other than the first letter I wrote to father to tell him that I'm safe, I didn't write a second one. Has there been a letter from father? Chu Luiyue paused and tapped her fingers on the table. According to the news that Xiao Zhou found out, father had already set off for West Hill a month ago because he received my letter. However, there was no trace of him until now. When Qi Han heard this, he also realized the seriousness of the matter. He pondered carefully for a while. Just as he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and his expression froze. Previously, Miss Mu's father and mother had written a letter, and this subordinate had passed it to young Master Jian. Is there anything written in that letter? Chu Luiyue thought for a moment, then got up and walked outside. Chu Luiyue was extremely fast and headed straight for Dragon Teeth Mountain. When she reached the foot of the mountain, the disciple on guard saw someone coming and was about to stop her when she took off her hood, revealing a gorgeous face. Where's Jian Fengqi? Chu Luiyue had been here before. In addition to the Wanjing competition and the sect meeting, many people knew her. Recently, because of her shocking identity, everyone in Xiling was talking about her. They didn't expect her to suddenly appear here at this time. Greetings, Your Highness. The two hurriedly bowed, but halfway through, they remembered that she was now an emperor and quickly changed their greetings. Young master is on the mountain today. I'll take you there. No need. I'll go personally. Chu Luiyue said and hurried up the mountain. When she was halfway up the mountain, she happened to meet Mu Hongyu. When she saw Chu Luiyue, Mu Hongyu was pleasantly surprised. Lu Yu. Why are you here? She rushed over and was about to pounce on Chu Luiyue when she hurriedly stopped. She had almost forgotten that Lu Yu was no longer Lu Yu. Chu Luiyue grabbed her hand. In the letter that your father and mother sent you, did they mention my father? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 907. Mu Hongyu was stunned. I think it was mentioned. Wait a minute. As she spoke, she rummaged through her interspatial ring and took out a letter after a short while. She had always been very careful with the letters from Yao Qin. This letter was handed to me by young master a few days ago. As Mu Hongyu spoke, she handed the letter over. It only mentioned one sentence. Chu Luiyue opened the letter and skimmed through it. As expected, she saw a sentence at the end. It said that Chu Ning had received her letter and was planning to go to the West Hill to reunite with her. During that period of time, Mu Hongyu's parents had been staying in the capital. When they heard the news, they were very envious. They wanted to come and see Mu Hongyu, but after considering many factors, they couldn't go together. Chu Luiyue looked at the date. It was indeed a month ago. She frowned. The distance between the capital of Yaoqin and the Tianling West Hill was more than tens of thousands of miles. Most importantly, there was also the heavens canopy. What kind of news did father receive to come to the West Hills so decisively? One had to know that with his strength, if no one led him, it would be impossible for him to find those teleportation arrays, let alone reach them safely. It was impossible for him not to understand these principles. But he still did it. Was it because he was confident, or because someone had helped him, or was he coerced? So much time had passed. I wonder how father is doing. Seeing Chu Luiyue's grave expression, Mu Hongyu also sensed that something was wrong. What's wrong? Is there a problem with uncle? Chu Luiyue briefly explained the matter to her. Mu Hongyu said in surprise. You didn't ask him to come. I thought you really wrote a letter to invite him. When she received the letter, it was right after Chu Luiyue announced his identity. At that time, she was still shocked that Chu Luiyue was actually Sheng Wanyu, so when she saw the letter, she naturally thought that Chu Luiyue had already made preparations and planned to bring Chu Ning over after everything was settled. But now, it seemed that this was not the case at all. Chu Luiyue's hand gripped the letter tightly. His brows furrowed as his mind raced. It was obvious that someone had deliberately used her name to make a move on her father. But who could it be? To be able to do this, the person must be someone from Heaven's Canopy. More importantly, the person must know her very well. Otherwise, the other party would never have thought of making a move on his father's side. Why was the other party doing this? Threatening her. But until now, she didn't seem to have received any news. If she hadn't sent Chang Wanzhou to Yaoqin this time, who knew when she would have found out about her father's disappearance? Why are you guys standing here? Just as the two of them fell silent, Jian Fengqi suddenly arrived. He waved the fan in his hand and walked over with a charming smile. However, his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue and sized her up carefully, as if he had never seen her before. When he got closer, he put away his fan, cupped his fists, and bowed slightly. Greetings. Your Majesty. He really didn't expect that Sheng Wanyu wasn't dead back then and had even returned with another identity. No wonder he always felt that Chu Luiyue was very familiar. So it was her. Now that he saw her again, his mood was indeed very strange. Seeing that the two of them seemed a little serious, Chu Luiyue was still holding the letter he had given to Mu Hongyu. It seemed like something had happened. What's going on? Jian Fengqi's gaze quickly scanned the duo's faces as he asked. Chu Luiyue returned the letter to Mu Hongyu and briefly explained what had happened. Jian Fengqi gradually frowned and tapped his hand with the bone fan. After you returned to West Hill, you have indeed offended many people, but there shouldn't be many who would think of harming Lord Chu Ning, right? Although Chu Luiyue had now ascended the throne, Jian Fengqi had always been bold and unrestrained. He had always been used to being free and unrestrained in front of her, so his words were still as unrestrained as before. Chu Luiyue didn't mind and nodded slightly. I thought that there would be some clues in this letter, but the content of the letter was similar to the information that Chang Wanzhou had found out. There weren't any more clues. Don't you have any way to find Lord Chu Ning? Jian Fengqi asked curiously. Based on her usual prudence and intelligence, she should have been prepared for this. Moreover, when she left the Imperial capital and went to West Hill, which was thousands of miles away, she should have been more careful in this regard. Chu Luiyue shook her head. It's too far away. She had indeed left something with Chu Ning so that it would be convenient for them to confirm each other's location and safety. However, the two of them were so far away now, how could they detect each other? Then the current solution is to try our best to find him. Jian Fengqi pondered for a moment. But I'm afraid this matter shouldn't be made public. To the current Chu Luyue, this matter could be said to be both simple and difficult at the same time. Now that she had regained her identity and the entire Tianling was under her control, it wasn't difficult for her to send someone to find the whereabouts of a person. However, the key was that Chu Ning's identity was somewhat special. He was the biological father of Chu Liyue's body. Chu Liyue's identity was different from before. Moreover, Sheng Guanyu had regained consciousness and was living well in the palace. Thus, Chu Ning's existence became a little awkward. I've already sent someone to look for him in private, but the world is so big, and without any clues, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Seeing her worried expression, Mu Hongyu couldn't help but pat her hand gently. Lu Yu, don't worry. Uncle is a good person, and nothing will happen to him. Chu Luyue sighed softly. I hope so. Jian Fengqi looked at the two of them overlapping hands at the side, and his eyes flickered slightly. Sheng Guanyu was indeed different from before. In the past, when she was the empress, although she was very amiable, she always carried a faint aura of alienation and nobility. Actually, it wasn't intentional. It was because she was too outstanding from the moment she was born, which caused her to have an indescribable sense of loneliness. Not to mention others, almost none of the children in the Tianling royal family were very close to her. Everyone subconsciously looked up to her, so naturally, they distanced themselves from her. Perhaps it was because of this that she was so good to Sheng Guanwan, who was closer to her, back then. Even Mu Qinghe later, after returning from the tribulation, her personality had obviously changed a little. She had the most trusted friends and many things that she didn't have before. She seemed to have become a lot more real. Thinking of this, Jian Fengqi hesitated for a moment before finally asking, have you seen Mu Qinghe? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 908. Chu Liyue's eyelashes fluttered slightly as she looked up at him. Not yet. What's the matter? It's nothing. I was just asking casually. Jian Fengqi clenched his fist and coughed against his lips. I remember that you seem to have a good relationship with Mu Qinghe. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows and asked. Jian Fengqi pouted in his heart. She kept saying I when she was talking to Mu Hongyu, and she sounded so affectionate. She addressed him as I the moment she spoke to him. Was she afraid that he wouldn't remember her current identity? After all, he had helped her a lot in the past. Why was she treating him differently now? However, he didn't dare to say this out loud. Your Majesty remembered wrongly. Jian Fengqi averted his gaze and looked away. Isn't your Majesty the clearest about our relationship back then? Chu Liyue's lips curved up. Yes, I still remember that when Hongyu's mother fell ill, Mu Qinghe directly asked you to go to Yaoqin to help. If the two of them didn't have a strong relationship, how could someone like Jian Fengqi travel so far to help treat someone's illness? Later on, Mu Qinghe directly entrusted her to Jian Fengqi and asked him to bring her back to Xiling. It was obvious that the two of them had a lot of private dealings and trusted each other very much. Wasn't it too late to say that their relationship wasn't good now? Jian Fengqi's face stiffened for a moment. How could he forget? Chu Liyue also knew about those things back then. He remembered them clearly. Seeing that he couldn't deny it, Jian Fengqi could only speak vaguely. If your Majesty really wants to put it this way, there's nothing wrong with that. Mu Qinghe is the deputy commander of the Black Cavalry after all. His status isn't low and he holds great power. Isn't it normal for me to have a lot of dealings with him? Chu Liyue's smile deepened. It would have been fine if Jian Fengqi hadn't said that, but he did, which proved that he had a guilty conscience. She said slowly, that's right. Oh, so that's how it is. But when I was the Empress concubine, didn't I have a higher status than him? Didn't you still not give me any face? Why did she suddenly change her temperament? Jian Fengqi choked. It was rare for him to be at a loss for words. If that's the case, then follow me to Mu Clan. Chu Luiyue lifted his chin slightly. It just so happens that I have a lot of questions to ask you all. Jian Fengqi was filled with regret when he arrived at Mu Mansion and looked at the familiar door. Why couldn't he restrain himself from talking too much? If he hadn't taken the initiative to bring this up, he definitely wouldn't have been forcefully brought here. The Black Cavalry was still in charge of guarding Mu Mansion, but the previous batch of people who were Mu Qinghe's confidants had all been replaced. The guards standing in front of the door were shocked when they saw the two of them. They were about to salute when Chu Luiyue waved his hand. "Where's Mu Qinghe?" One of the guards hurriedly said, "Vice President Mu, he's been in the mansion all this time. Lord Shijing is also here." Previously, Chu Luiyue sent Shijing to escort Mu Qinghe back, and Shijing had been staying here since then. Mu Qinghe's cultivation hadn't been destroyed, and only people at Shijing's level could suppress him. Chu Luiyue nodded slightly and walked straight in. Jian Fengqi was struggling in his heart and didn't want to continue forward. Then, he saw Chu Luiyue turn around and glance at him. Jian Fengqi's heart trembled, and he finally followed him obediently. As soon as they entered the inner courtyard, Shijing heard the noise and came out directly. "Your Highness." The 13 new guards were directly under Chu Luiyue, so although she was now in power, they were still used to calling her Your Highness. Chu Luiyue was very direct. "I brought Hong Yao and young Master Jian to see Mu Qinghe." Jian Fengqi. Shijing glanced at Jian Fengqi in surprise. It was not strange for Her Highness and Hong Yao to come, but what did it have to do with Jian Fengqi? But he didn't ask much. Mu Qinghe is now in the training field in the backyard. Although Mu Qinghe was imprisoned in Mu Mansion and was not allowed to go out, she was relatively free here. Anyway, barriers and Xian formations had already been set up outside, so Mu Qinghe couldn't escape. When they came to the training field, Chu Luiyue saw Mu Qinghe practicing swordsmanship on the empty training field at a glance. Hearing the sound, he stopped and looked back. When he saw Chu Luiyue, a trace of fluctuation flashed in his eyes, but he quickly calmed down and returned to his usual indifferent calmness. Hong Yao flapped its wings and flew out. It hesitated in front of Chu Luiyue, looking at Mu Qinghe and then at Chu Luiyue. It looked very pitiful. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh. "Okay, she's your master after all. Go if you want to." When Hong Yao heard this, it happily rubbed itself against her face and then flew towards Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe only saw a blue shadow coming straight to her, and a moment of hesitation appeared on her face. Now that Hong Yao could follow her, it couldn't be better. If she had an intimate relationship with him, it didn't seem too good. However, Hong Yao had been very worried about her these days. At this time, it finally saw her, so it rushed straight to her. How could it care about anything else? It directly bumped into Mu Qinghe's arms. Mu Qinghe had no choice but to catch it and pat its head gently. Hong Yao's eyes were red, and it almost cried again, but fortunately, it stopped in time. Mu Qinghe glanced at it with a complicated look. Chu Luiyue asked him to stay in the name of Hong Yao. Of course, it was just a superficial excuse. She would never let go of anyone who betrayed her easily. Logically speaking, he should have been killed on the same day. However, no. She spared his life and didn't even give him any punishment. She just put him under house arrest in Mu Mansion. And here, except for the fact that he couldn't move freely and the people around him no longer obeyed his orders, everything else seemed to be the same as before. He vaguely guessed Chu Luiyue's plan, but she didn't come after waiting for several days. Until today. Moreover, she brought Jian Fengqi with her. Mu Qinghe's gaze stopped on Jian Fengqi for a moment. Jian Fengqi instantly felt that there was a dagger at his back, and he couldn't wait to run away. He had always been thick-skinned and rarely felt like this. He only felt that every minute and every second of staying here was very unbearable. He really didn't bring Chu Luiyue here on purpose. I left West Hill for 2 years. Chu Luiyue said lightly. In West Hill City, things have changed. I came here today to ask, when did the two of you become so close to each other? Back then, because Jian Fengqi was too presumptuous and flamboyant, Mu Qinghe had a lot of conflicts with him. Now, in the blink of an eye, the two of them seemed to have turned from enemies to friends. She really didn't believe that there was nothing going on here. Asked Chu Luiyue with a smile as she sat down on a chair at the side. Qinghe, you go first. Digression, the 5th update is a little late, but it was released before 1 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 909. Mu Qinghe was taken aback by the sudden shout, and he looked at the woman not far away. She was sitting there leisurely. Her clothes were very simple, but she still had a noble aura. She still had a smile on her youthful face, and her eyes were as bright as stars. She looked just like she did many years ago. However, she called him by his name in such a relaxed tone, as if the grudges of the past few years didn't exist at all. Mu Qinghe slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves and lowered his eyes. It's just a normal meeting. Your Majesty, you don't have to worry. Mu Qinghe only gave a short answer. Then, he closed his mouth and didn't seem to have any intention of explaining. Jian Fengqi glanced at him as if he wanted to say something. He knitted his brows slightly, and hesitation flashed across his eyes. Even now, he still doesn't want to say anything. In fact, what Chu Luiyue asked was also what he wanted to ask. When the Imperial Ancestral Hall burned for a day and a night, even he was alarmed and rushed to the palace. In the end, Mu Qinghe was even later than him. Even he could see that there was something wrong with the princess's death. However, Mu Qinghe didn't express any objections from the beginning to the end. If it weren't for some things that happened later, Jian Fengqi would almost believe that he had completely betrayed Sheng Wanyu. If he was on Jiang Yuqing's side in the past because he cared about the big picture, now that Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Wanwan had been destroyed, what else could he say? Jian Fengqi really didn't understand. He wanted to help explain, but in fact, he didn't know much. Mu Qinghe was the only one who knew the reason for many of the things he did. If others said anything, it would only complicate the situation. What do you think? Chu Luiyue didn't seem surprised by Mu Qinghe's answer. He shrugged and looked at Jian Fengqi. Jian Fengqi's eyebrows twitched. It was just a small quarrel in the past. Come to think of it, there wasn't much conflict. Chu Luiyue smiled faintly, but his eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Jian Fengqi's words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. He could not help but look at Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe lowered her head. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, he raised his head again and calmly said, His Majesty sent out 3 requests for help that day, right? Chu Luiyue slowly sat up straight and stared at him. Mu Qinghe put one hand behind her back and slowly clenched it, but her expression was calm. Those 3 messages were intercepted by me. It was me who cut off His Majesty's last chance of survival that day. It was already the middle of June, and the weather was a little hot. People came and went on the streets, and it was very lively. Rong Xiao walked alone on the street. Because he wore a hood and restrained his aura, he didn't attract much attention. Most of the people around were still talking about her. Rong Xiao walked forward and listened to the discussions of the people around him. Every time he heard those people's exclamations of surprise and admiration, his thin scarlet lips would curl slightly. She could always do what she wanted to do. It wasn't that he didn't want to come and help, but in the end, he still felt that it was better for her to give it her all. It was best for her to take back what she had lost. It was best for her to take revenge on her own. Only then could she completely wash away all the pain she had suffered. As for him, all he had to do was pass the knife to her whenever she needed it. Of course, the knife had to be fast enough. Just as he was thinking of this, he suddenly felt his surroundings darken. He raised his head to take a look and found that the sky that was previously clear and boundless was now suddenly filled with dark clouds and darkening. Soon, raindrops fell from his forehead. It was cold. He was walking in the direction of the 100 Herbs building, but he didn't expect that the weather would change halfway. The rain soon became heavier. The peddlers packed up and left one after another. White mist gradually appeared on the bluestone. There was only a curtain of rain between heaven and earth. Rong Xiu frowned slightly, and there was a deep look in his eyes. Then, he turned around and walked in another direction. The tall figure of the man quickly disappeared in the rain. After Chu Luiyue walked out of the Mu mansion alone, she walked aimlessly on the street. In her mind, she kept recalling what Mu Qinghe said just now. He admitted it. He said that he did it. What else did he say? Oh, right, he said that he was originally Jiang Yuqing's man. So, his betrayal was actually not a betrayal. It turned out that, the truth was like this. Countless scenes flashed before her eyes. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. The wind gradually rose, and the surrounding sky quickly darkened. She glanced up at him. It was stuffy, gloomy, and cold. She had already forgotten what kind of expression she had after hearing those words, and what kind of answer she gave. She didn't even know how she walked out of the Mu mansion. Suddenly, she felt a furry touch. It was Dumpling squatting on her shoulder, gently rubbing her face. Chu Luiyue shook her head. Dumpling, don't worry. I'm fine. She probably left hope for herself, thinking, but in this world, there weren't so many thinking. Chu Luiyue looked at the sky, and there was rain dripping. In the blink of an eye, it sped up, connecting the sky and the earth into lines. Chu Luiyue moved and was about to go back, but she suddenly felt a cold aura rushing toward her from the distance in the rain. She suddenly looked up. Alarm bells rang in her heart. A bluish-purple ball of light broke through the air. It was heading straight for her face. She staggered her feet and was about to make a move when she suddenly felt someone approaching her from behind quickly and grabbing her waist. At the same time, a silver blade of light flew out. It collided with the ball of light. It was as if a transparent barrier had appeared around him, and all the fluctuations were blocked outside. An extremely familiar cold fragrance hit her, and Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly beat faster. She turned around and saw that the person who came had a noble appearance and an astonishing aura. It was Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu. Why are you here? Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly. Rong Xiu hugged her tighter, and his other hand held a black umbrella. His voice was low and lazy. It's raining. I'm here to hold the umbrella for you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9-10. Her heart, which had been empty, seemed to be filled with something in an instant. Chu Luiyue subconsciously hugged his lean waist tightly and pressed her face against his chest. Listening to his strong heartbeat, it seemed to make the almost frozen blood in her body flow again. The heavy rain fell, and the cold wind blew everywhere. Countless ripples on the ground intertwined. Under the dark sky, only the two of them, who were tightly leaning against each other, could be seen. With a burst of eardrums, Chu Luiyue felt that her drifting thoughts were finally pulled back. Her numb limbs gradually regained their warmth, and the countless illusions in front of her disappeared little by little. Only Rong Xiao was left. Hugging and leaning on each other, it was so real. The black umbrella above her head stood up, as if it was blocking out all the wind and rain. His broad and warm embrace made her yearn for it. Chu Luiyue was in a daze. After a while, she said in a low voice, "Rong Xiao, I miss you so much." Rong Xiao frowned slightly. There was something wrong with her voice. She had always been smart, independent, and strong. No matter what kind of situation she encountered, she never seemed to panic. Even after experiencing such a betrayal, she still relied on her own strength to return all the pain she had suffered and take back everything that belonged to her. She seemed to be invincible. But in this world, how could any flesh and blood not know pain and suffering? It was just that someone was better at hiding it. He leaned closer, and his jade-like chin gently rested on her head. "I'm here, don't be afraid." It was a simple sentence, but it was his most cherished promise. Chu Liuyue's eyes suddenly became hot. Even if she was homeless and miserable, even if she was full of twists and turns, there would always be one person in this world who would appear and accompany her when she needed him most. He gave her courage and love. That was enough. She closed her eyes, dispersing the last bit of disappointment and regret in her heart. Anyway, it was not like she had not experienced a deeper blow. Now, this was nothing. At the very least, the current situation was still under her control. Bang! The sound of something exploding came from behind. Chu Luiyue looked up from Rong Xiao's arms and glanced back. She saw that the purplish-blue ball of light that was flying towards her had completely dissipated after colliding with Rong Xiao's power. At this moment, there was only something left that fell into the water. Pitter-patter, splashing a few drops of rainwater. Chu Luiyue looked over and vaguely saw that it was a thumb-sized object. It was glowing faintly in the water, but he couldn't see it clearly. "What's that?" Chu Luiyue asked curiously. Just now, she had clearly sensed that this thing was coming for her. The aura he felt at that moment was very unfamiliar. She thought for a moment, but she couldn't figure out who would do such a thing. "It's just a small toy," Rong Xiao said lightly. Chu Luiyue didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Rong Xiao seemed to have recognized the origin of that thing, and there was a hint of coldness in his tone. Chu Luiyue gave Dumpling a look. Dumpling flew out and picked up the thing. Rong Xiao glanced at Dumpling, his eyes cold. Dumpling shuddered. Its strong desire to live made its wings tremble slightly, and it almost threw the thing out. Withstanding the huge pressure, it finally handed the thing to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand and was about to receive it when Rong Xiao, who was beside her, grabbed her hand. At the same time, a force flew out and hit the item. Bang! With a crisp sound, the thing cracked open. Then, a piece of paper flew out and unfolded automatically. It seemed to be a piece of white rice paper that was casually cut, but it floated in mid-air and didn't get stained by the raindrops at all. It was as if there was an invisible barrier around it. There were only 2 lines of words on that piece of paper. The first line was, "Sheng Guanyu, congratulations." The second line was, "Your father is doing very well at Ai's place, don't miss him. We will meet again in a month's time." Just as Chu Luiyue finished reading, that piece of paper quickly combusted and turned into ashes, disappearing without a trace. Other than the faint smell of burning that filled the air, it was as if nothing had happened. But Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes wide, and her heart was filled with shock. Because she had seen the handwriting on that piece of paper before. Back then, she had received a letter from Heaven's Canopy, and that letter had half a Xian formation as a seal. She had drawn the remaining half of the Xian formation before opening the letter. And that letter had written, "Sheng Guanyu, long time no see." At that time, she hadn't told anyone about her identity, so after receiving that letter, she had thought about it for a long time, but she couldn't figure out who wrote the letter. After coming to Xiling, she had been busy with various things and had forgotten about this matter for a while. Until today, when she saw that piece of paper again, it must have been written by the same person, and the other party had obviously known about her identity a long time ago. It was even possible that the other party knew everything about her like the back of their hand. Needless to say, this congratulations was referring to her ascension to the throne. And her father was also deliberately taken away by the other party. Chu Luiyue frowned. This person, who exactly was it? At first, she thought that it was someone from the Tianling dynasty, but now it seemed that it wasn't the case. To be able to call himself I and have such means, it was very likely that he came from outside the Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint flashed across the corner of his eyes. She was really haunting him. Chu Luiyue suddenly turned her head and looked at Rong Xiu. You know who this is? She had an inexplicable intuition that Rong Xiu seemed to know more than she expected. She didn't know where this feeling came from, but judging from Rong Xiu's reaction just now, it seemed that her guess was right. Rong Xiu's thin red lips moved slightly. Just as he was about to speak, a shout came from the corner of the street behind them. Your Highness. It was 13's voice. Chu Luiyue turned around and saw a slender young man running toward them quickly. His movements were nimble and free. It seemed that he didn't move much, but he was already in front of them. 13 came in the rain, but he was surrounded by a layer of enchantment, so he wasn't worried about getting wet. Because he was still young, Chu Luiyue almost never assigned tasks to 13. She only let him focus on cultivation. This also allowed 13 to come and go freely both inside and outside the palace. Today, he happened to meet Sheng Guanyu. When he heard that it was related to his master, he immediately agreed and left the palace to look for him. When he was still a short distance away from Chu Luiyue, 13 shouted excitedly, Your Highness, the retired emperor was worried that you would be out alone for too long, so he asked me to send you an umbrella and take you back to the palace. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9-11. Suddenly, 13's voice stopped abruptly, and he stopped in his tracks. He looked at the scene in front of him in shock. Someone was holding an umbrella for Her Highness. More importantly, he was hugging Her Highness. With such an intimate gesture, anyone could tell that the relationship between the two was not ordinary. You. Who are you? 13 had come happily to bring Chu Luiyue back to the palace, but when he saw this scene, he felt uncomfortable. Without waiting for Chu Luiyue to speak, Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and said calmly, I'm Yu's fiancé. 13's eyes widened in shock, and his mouth dropped open. You're Her Highness's fiancé. Didn't Her Highness just settle Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Guanwan? How did she suddenly have a fiancé? Because 13 was young, no one told him about this, so he was especially shocked at first glance. Chu Luiyue was thinking, what did 13 say just now? He seemed to have mentioned the retired emperor. Based on Rong Xiu's intelligence, he would have sensed something wrong with this sentence and guessed her identity. You said just now, who asked you to bring you back? Sure enough, Rong Xiu spoke casually and directly. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. 13 was about to reply, but he saw that there was something wrong with Her Highness's eyes, so he covered his mouth. That. Rong Xiu, I have something to tell you. Chu Luiyue originally wanted to find a suitable time to tell him everything, but she didn't expect that the moment the two of them met, she had no choice but to say it now. Rong Xiu looked down at her. There was a trace of embarrassment on his face, but there was an undetectable trace of a smile at the corner of his lips. Was she embarrassed that she had not been honest with him about those things before? Rong Xiu's voice was low. This low rhetorical question seemed to come from his chest, pressing tightly against his heart and brushing past his eardrums. It was pleasing to the ear and numbing. Chu Luiyue blushed slightly, but she held his hand gently and firmly, their fingers intertwined. Come with me. 6 Cloud Street. Chu Estate. The rain had just stopped, and in the quiet and leisurely courtyard, there was already a shallow accumulation of rainwater. Water droplets continuously dripped from the eaves and fell into it, creating a circle of ripples. The air after the rain was moist and sweet. 13 stood outside the door, waiting anxiously and impatiently. From time to time, he would glance at the tightly shut door. Her Highness and that man had been in there for a long time and still hadn't come out. From His Highness's words, it seemed that he wanted to explain something to that man. However, His Highness was of noble birth and was decisive in killing. Since when did he need to explain so much to others? And most importantly, that man was actually Her Highness' fiancé. 13 scratched his head. 7th brother and the others didn't mention it before. He grew up in Shilin City and was very sure that the man was definitely not from Shilin City. However, judging from the aura around him, he shouldn't be underestimated. 13 looked inside again and scratched his head. This is what I wanted to tell you. In the room, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu sat facing each other. Chu Luiyue told him everything about her past life and current life. I am Chu Luiyue from the Empire of Yaoqin, and also from the Shanghai Yu of the Tianling dynasty. She looked at Rong Xiu and said word by word seriously. Previously, I only said that there was an enemy of mine in Shilin City, but I didn't tell you everything clearly because at that time, I wasn't sure if I could successfully complete what I wanted to do. But now, everything has been settled. I originally wanted to find an opportunity to tell you, but I didn't expect it to happen today. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. Rong Xiu, this is the real me. After saying that, Chu Luiyue fell silent and waited quietly for Rong Xiu's reaction. However, unexpectedly, Rong Xiu's face didn't show any shock or surprise. Instead, there was a hint of tenderness in his eyes. He reached out and held her hand tightly. His fingers gently rubbed the back of her hand a few times. Does it hurt? Chu Luiyue was stunned. What? Whether it was that day when you rejected me or everything that happened after that. My you must have suffered a lot, right? Rong Xiu looked at her, his eyes deep. He was waiting for her to tell him everything personally, but to her, it was undoubtedly exposing her own scars. Knowing that she had suffered a lot was also a kind of torture for him. Chu Luiyue was stunned, but her eyes suddenly became hot. Rong Xiu, you are not angry that I lied to you. Although she didn't mean to deceive him, she had hidden too many things after all. Rong Xiu actually didn't care at all. Hearing that, Rong Xiu shook his head gently, smiled slightly, and sighed softly. I don't even have enough time to feel sorry for you. How can I have the energy to be angry? Chu Luiyue didn't expect Rong Xiu to have such a reaction. In the next moment, Rong Xiu leaned closer and sucked a teardrop from the corner of her eye. Promise me that in the future, don't shoulder anything by yourself. I'll always be there. The previous uneasiness and guilt all disappeared at this moment, and all of it turned into grievances and poured out in torrents. Suddenly, as if the heavy armor had been removed, her whole body relaxed. The suffering and torture that she had experienced in the past seemed to be not worth mentioning now. The heavens gave her pain and disaster, but they also gave her Rong Xiu. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and buried her head in his shoulder, her voice muffled. Okay. After a while, there was a knock on the door outside. 13's somewhat nervous voice sounded. Your Highness. The rain has stopped for a long time. Should we go back to the palace? In fact, he didn't want to rush it this time, but there were still people waiting in the palace. Chu Liuyue's emotions gradually calmed down, and she pulled herself out of Rongxiu's arms. She almost forgot that 13 was still waiting outside. I wanted to talk to you about something, but it seems that I can't today. Rongxiu tidied her messy hair and gently rubbed her face. Chu Liyue looked at him, and a white light suddenly flashed in her mind. She vaguely felt that Rongxiu seemed to want to talk to her about something important. And it was very likely that it was because of his previous identity as the Son of God. But 13 was already rushing her, and it was indeed not convenient for her to stay for too long. Chu Liyue could only nod. Then you can stay here for the night. Tomorrow. She paused, raised her eyes slightly, and glanced at Rongxiu again. Actually, Father mentioned to me before that. He said that he wanted to see you. Rongxiu understood and kissed her gently between her eyebrows. Then I'll visit father-in-law tomorrow. Chu Liyue's face turned red, and then she was a little worried. Won't tomorrow be too soon? There should be some time to prepare for this kind of thing. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes, and a smile flashed across his eyes. His wife didn't seem to have much confidence in her man. Then, in 3 days. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9-12. After saying goodbye to Rongxiu, Chu Liyue returned to the palace with Shirsan. She was disappointed and worried, but after seeing Rongxiu, she inexplicably felt relieved. It seemed that with him there was nothing to worry about. When she returned to Zhaoyu Hall, Sheng Wanyu had been waiting there for a long time. Seeing Chu Liyue return safely, Sheng Wanyu breathed a sigh of relief. Ever since the incident 2 years ago, he had become much more sensitive. Chu Liyue had been away for too long, and he would be worried. Although he knew that she had a lot of trump cards now, it was normal for her parents to be worried. Chu Liyue thought about it and only told Sheng Wanyu that Rongxiu would come in 3 days. As for Chu Ning being held hostage, she did not mention much. Now she did not even know who the other party was, and telling her father would only make him more worried. However, Sheng Wanyu became more and more curious about Rongxiu. He wondered what kind of person could be so favored by her. Looking at Chu Liyue's sparkling eyes when she mentioned Rongxiu, Sheng Wanyu secretly made up his mind. As long as the boy was a good person, he would not object. Everything was for the sake of his daughter's happiness. After sending Sheng Wanyu away, Chu Liyue returned to the study and sat down on a chair. She had experienced too many things today, which made her a little confused. Countless intertwined images flashed through her mind. After a long while, she opened her eyes. Her eyes were calm and serene. Taizu. Chu Liyue respectfully called out. A translucent phantom appeared in front of her. It was Taizu. Girl, what's bothering you? Taizu asked with one hand behind his back. Chu Liyue nodded. The black demon cave you mentioned before, what kind of existence is it? Hearing this, Taizu looked solemn and was silent for a while. Chu Liyue waited quietly. She had some understanding of the various dynasties in Heaven's Canopy. Some of them were stronger than the Tianling dynasty, while some were weaker. However, she had never heard of the Black Demon Cave. That's a hidden sect. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. Hidden sects. After a long while, Taizu spoke slowly. He let out a long sigh, as if he was recalling something. 1,000 years ago, I was already at the peak of the 9th stage, just one step away from stepping into the deity realm. But even after 10 years, I still haven't succeeded. After that, I left Tianling and traveled the continent. Encountering the Black Demon Cave was actually a pure accident. The experts of the Black Demon Cave are as numerous as the clouds. Even when I was at my peak, I still couldn't be compared to them. I've seen the Black Demon Cave's people move mountains and fill seas. They're truly great experts. Even after 1,000 years, the things that happened back then were still deeply engraved in his mind, as fresh as yesterday. Chu Luyue was also shocked. Taizu was the strongest expert of the Tianling dynasty in 1,000 years. If even he said so, then, just how strong were the people of the Black Demon Cave? That day, although that person didn't have a physical body and was only left with a soul, the aura of the Black Demon Cave was extremely strong. That's why I recognized it at a glance. These hidden sects were very strong in cultivation, and most of them had their own distinctive characteristics. As long as you've seen them, you'll be able to recognize them at a glance. But these people are usually very arrogant and rarely enter the world, let alone participate in the disputes between dynasties. Taizu shook his head, looking puzzled. I don't know what's going on this time, Chu Luyue pondered for a moment. That soul has been in Sheng Wanwan's body for a long time, at least a few years. According to what Sheng Wanwan said, she herself doesn't know when that person came into existence. But many of the things she did later were because she was bewitched by that person. Including, the matter of killing me. Taizu looked at her with a complicated gaze. Actually, that day, I've already sensed that that person seems to be targeting you. Do you know why? Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. She still remembered clearly what that person had said at that time. It seemed to be because of the water droplet in her body. Ever since this water droplet transformed into an existence similar to the pill of origin in her body, it had been in this form almost all the time. But that day, under the influence of that man, it transformed into the appearance of a transparent book page again, and faintly felt like it was struggling to be pulled out. But if that person came for this, then why did he target her so early on? Before she died in her previous life, she didn't have this thing on her. It was only after she had been reborn that such an item suddenly appeared in her body out of nowhere. Even now, she still didn't know what it was. She shook her head. That person's attack failed, but he definitely won't give up. He'll come again in the future. Taizu said in a low voice. It's fine if he's alone, but if he implicates others, this was actually what he was most worried about. If the people of Black Demon Cave wanted to attack Tianling, even he might not be able to defeat them. Girl, the most important thing for you now is to improve your cultivation as soon as possible. This way, even if someone wants to trouble you in the future, you'll have the power to deal with it. Taizu frowned. You have too many treasures on you, and any one of them will attract the covetous eyes of countless people. You can hide it for a while, but you can't hide it forever. The only way, and also the best way, was to become stronger by himself. Chu Luyue nodded seriously. You will remember Taizu's teachings. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Chu Luyue got up and packed up, then went to the Yuanhe Palace. The Yuanhe Palace was Sheng Guanyu's bedchamber. It was obvious that Sheng Guanyu wanted to meet Rongxiu as Rongxiu's father by setting the venue here instead of the palace hall where the other officials would attend court. Although Sheng Guanyu was now the emperor, in Sheng Guanyu's eyes, whether this marriage could make her happy was the most important thing. Perhaps in the eyes of the world, an emperor's marriage was a matter of state first, followed by family affairs. But in Sheng Guanyu's eyes, it was a matter of family first, followed by state affairs. Everywhere she passed, the palace servants bowed respectfully. But just as she walked out of the Yuanhe Palace, she saw someone standing there, as if waiting for someone. Hearing the movement, the person turned around. When he saw Chu Luyue's face, a trace of excitement and joy appeared on the handsome young man's face. He took 2 quick steps forward. Your Majesty. Chu Luiyue looked at him strangely. Zhao Zicheng. Why are you here? This was the second son of the Zhao family, also a famous family in Xiling City. But he had left Xiling a few years ago, and she didn't expect him to come back today. Hearing her question, Zhao Zicheng's ears turned red. When I heard that your Majesty had returned, I rushed back day and night, hoping to see your Majesty. He seemed to be very nervous, but his face was full of hope and sincerity. Your Majesty, I'm here today to confess my feelings to you. Previously, because you chose Jiang Yuqing, I didn't say much and left Xiling. But this time, please give Zicheng a chance. The corner of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. Is he confessing? On the day when I'm going to meet father with my fiancée. Digression, I suddenly found out that a friend of mine had a tumor, so I chatted with him for a long time. Everyone, take care of your health and have regular checkups. Sigh, I'll continue at 6. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:13. Zhao Zicheng didn't seem to notice anything wrong with Chu Luiyue's expression and continued speaking. Because I know that your Majesty has been busy recently, Zicheng has been staying in the residence these few days and didn't dare to disturb you. But... Zhao Zicheng looked up and quickly glanced at the woman in front of him. His eyes were filled with unconcealable adoration, and his nervous heart was beating wildly. But... Zicheng has admired your Majesty for many years. I'm afraid that if I don't say it this time, I won't have another chance in the future. Zhao Zicheng instantly felt much better after finally speaking his mind. However, his handsome face was stained with a tinge of red. His eyes were filled with hope and uneasiness as he looked at Chu Luiyue as if he was waiting for her answer. Chu Luiyue sighed inwardly. To be honest, Zhao Zicheng was very good. Although the Zhao family wasn't considered the top family in Xiling City, they were still officials of the Tianling dynasty for hundreds of years and had a deep foundation. As the second son of the Zhao family's direct descendant, Zhao Zicheng's status was even more precious. Most importantly, he was an extremely outstanding mystic master genius. In the entire Xiling, except for Chu Luiyue, almost no one could be compared to him. If Jian Fengqi was a genius who was only one step behind her in alchemy, then Zhao Zicheng was above mystic master level and could fight with her. When she was young, she cultivated with many elders of the Imperial family. Jian Fengqi and Zhao Zicheng had been her study companions for a period of time. Unlike Jian Fengqi's arrogant and unbridled personality, Zhao Zicheng was more like a modest gentleman with an introverted and gentle personality. For so many years, everyone in Xiling City praised the second son of the Zhao family when they mentioned him. Even compared to Jiang Yuqing, he was definitely on par in all aspects. Zhao Zicheng, I remember that you are already 27 this year. Chu Luiyue said. Zhao Zicheng was stunned for a moment and nodded in confusion. That's right. At this age, you should have married and had children long ago. Chu Luiyue said sincerely and calmly. You don't have to waste any more time on me. Zhao Zicheng's originally slightly red face turned white with a swish. A hint of panic flashed in his eyes. Your Majesty, what do you mean? Chu Luiyue shook his head. As smart as you are, there's no way you don't know what I mean. If that's the case, don't mention it again in the future. Please leave. With that, Chu Luiyue prepared to leave. Zhao Zicheng only hesitated for a moment before he immediately blocked her way again. Your Majesty, Zicheng is sincerely seeking your hand in marriage. Zhao Zicheng tried hard to suppress the nervousness and embarrassment in his heart. Back then, because Jiang Yuqing beat me to it and you agreed to the engagement with him, I put away my thoughts and left the West Hill alone. Although it's uncomfortable, as long as you're happy, everything else doesn't matter. But now, he has betrayed you, and I am filled with regret. Missing it once is already a matter of life and death. I don't want the same thing to happen a second time. Zhao Zicheng was determined to come today. A few years ago, he left heartbroken, thinking that he had helped her, but he didn't expect that in the end, everything would be so absurd. When he heard that she had survived a great disaster and returned from a tribulation, he immediately rushed back. No matter what, he would definitely persevere to the end this time. Although he himself didn't care much about worldly possessions, in terms of background, talent, and so on, he was confident that he was definitely one of the most suitable choices for her now. Chu Luiyue felt a headache coming on. Zhao Zicheng had a cool and gentle personality, but when this kind of person was stubborn, even a few oxen couldn't pull him back. Zhao Zicheng, I have always understood your feelings. Chu Luiyue thought about it, but still decided to tell him the truth. Since many years ago, even if you don't say it, I understand. Zhao Zicheng was actually a very honest person and didn't know how to hide his feelings. She wasn't stupid. They had spent a few years studying together, and later he entered the Imperial court as an official. From time to time, they would see each other in the Imperial court or at palace banquets. How could she not know his feelings? It was just that things like feelings could never be forced. Zhao Zicheng was stunned for a moment, and it took him a while to realize what she meant. Looking at the clear eyes of the woman in front of him, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. Although her appearance was slightly different from before, her eyebrows and eyes were still the familiar appearance in his memory. She was still her. These words were a clear rejection. But, he didn't want to give up just like that. Can't you give me a chance? Zhao Zicheng spoke with difficulty, as if something in his eyes would shatter at the slightest touch. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of forgetting and letting go of this person after so many years of thinking. If he could do it, he wouldn't be standing here today. Just one time and, no. A low and cold man's voice suddenly came from behind. Although the tone was light, there was a faint sharp pressure in the words. Zhao Zicheng turned around and saw a man in white. He didn't know when, but he had appeared not far behind him. The man looked to be in his early 20s. He was tall and wore a white robe. The breeze blew the corner of his robe, making him look like a banished immortal. But what was even more shocking was his appearance. His facial features were as if they were carefully carved and cast by the heavens. There wasn't a single spot that wasn't perfect. He was noble and unparalleled, but there was also a trace of demonic aura. Just by standing there, he could easily take away all the colors between heaven and earth. Even Zhao Zicheng had to admit that this person's appearance and aura was really something he had never seen before in his life. You are, Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curled into a faint smile. I am Yu Er's fiancé, Rong Xiu. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:14. It was a simple sentence, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder. It smashed into Zhao Zicheng's heart. His mind went blank for a moment. What did you say? He was her fiancé. Didn't she just come back? When he looked back in shock, only to see the woman who had been distant and cold to him just now unconsciously smile after seeing the person who came. Thousands of stars seemed to shine in her eyes. At this moment, Zhao Zicheng's heart turned cold. Rong Xiu. Chu Luiyue didn't expect him to come so quickly and walked over. Why are you here so early? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled faintly. Since I want to meet my father-in-law, I naturally have to be early. Besides, if I came late, wouldn't I miss a good show? Chu Luiyue glared at him. How could he joke with her at this time? She had clearly rejected him just now. Rong Xiu looked at her angry and coquettish expression and smiled slightly. His heart itched slightly and he wanted to hug her directly. But when he thought that this was the Tianling Palace and there were many palace servants around to serve them, he suppressed the urge and just held her hand. Seeing the two of them clasped hands, Zhao Zicheng finally reacted. He frowned subconsciously. Anyone could see that the two of them were very close. Fiancé, why hadn't he heard of it before? Zhao Zicheng had specially asked his father a few days ago to sound out Sheng Wanyu, but he didn't mention it at that time. Could it be someone she met in the past 2 years? If he remembered correctly, she had returned from an empire called Yaoqin outside Heaven's Canopy. This man, you don't seem to be from West Hill. Zhao Zicheng took a deep breath and tried to make himself look calm. Not to mention West Hill, even in the entire Tianling, there was no Rong family among the famous families. There was a high probability that it was from Yaoqin. Chu Luiyue didn't want to say too much to Zhao Zicheng, so she said, "Father should be waiting for me. Father should be waiting inside, so I'll go in with Rong Xiu first. Second young master Zhao, you should go back too." Zhao Zicheng looked at Rong Xiu insistently. "Since you're Her Majesty's fiancé, there's nothing you can't say about your family background, right?" He was going to go against Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu looked at Chu Luiyue comfortingly and smiled. "I'm 7th Prince Yaoqin, Rong Xiu." He was indeed from of Yaoqin's people. Of course. Of the ROF of course. Of the Tianling of the Tianling of the Emperor of the Emperors of the difference in status between the two of them was too great. Not to mention him, even the officials of the Imperial court wouldn't agree to this marriage. Zhao Zicheng couldn't help but look at Chu Luiyue. Of course she knew this, but she was still so insistent. It was enough to prove that she was truly moved by this man. Zhao Zicheng clenched his fists tightly, feeling extremely conflicted. In the early years, it was Jiang Yuqing who was one step ahead. Now, there was Rong Xiu. It seemed that he was always a little short of success every time. He really couldn't take it lying down. "I am the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Zhao Zicheng." Although Zhao Zicheng hadn't stayed in West Hill for the past few years, he hadn't resigned from his position. His journey had been smooth, and he had already become an assistant minister at such a young age. But in fact, this title was not worth mentioning compared to his aristocratic background. There were several assistant ministers of the Ministry of Rights, but there was only one second young master of the Zhao family. Zhao Zicheng had no intention of using his background to suppress others. He only wanted to use his official position to try and pressure the other party. When ordinary people heard this, it was inevitable that they would be surprised and in admiration. But after he finished speaking, the man opposite him only nodded with an indifferent expression, as if he didn't care. "Second young master Zhao, I've heard of you." Chu Luiyue and Zhao Zicheng both looked at him in surprise. Chu Luiyue thought that Rong Xiu had only been to West Hill once before, and Zhao Zicheng wasn't here at that time. How could he have heard of Zhao Zicheng's name? Zhao Zicheng thought to himself, judging from this Rong Xiu's tone, he seems to know something about me, but why doesn't he care at all? Perhaps, he doesn't know much about the situation in West Hill. If that's the case, it would explain his series of reactions. Zhao Zicheng took a deep breath. "I have a few words that I would like to talk to young Master Rong alone. Is it convenient for you?" Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and nodded. "Why not?" Seeing that the atmosphere was getting strange, Chu Luiyue grabbed Rong Xiu. "If you have something to say, say it here. It's most likely related to me. Why can't I listen?" Zhao Zicheng looked at her hesitantly. "Your Majesty, Rong Xiu and I are engaged. What can I not listen to?" "Second young master Zhao, if you have something to say, please speak your mind." Rong Xiu blinked, and a faint smile flashed across his eyes. Well, it's rare to see her supporting me like this. It feels good. Zhao Zicheng's eyes dimmed for a moment. Even Jiang Yuqing back then, she didn't seem to have spoken up for me like this. She's protecting me like this. It's obvious that she's really in love. On the other hand, Rong Xiu was standing behind her, as if he was enjoying this woman's protection of him with a clear conscience. Zhao Zicheng suddenly became angry. If it's already like this, won't it be worse in the future? This marriage is not worth it to me. Zhao Zicheng's expression became much more serious. Since your majesty has said so, I will not mince my words. Young Master Rong, if you are sincere to Her Majesty, then please leave her now and don't have anything to do with her anymore. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere suddenly turned cold. The space around them seemed to freeze inch by inch. Chu Luyue could clearly feel an extremely cold aura spreading from Rong Xiu's body. For a moment, Zhao Zicheng felt an extremely dangerous killing intent. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. His hair stood on end. But in the blink of an eye, this feeling quickly disappeared without a trace. It was as if everything was just an illusion. Rong Xiu smiled, but his voice was so cold that it made one's heart tremble. Oh. What if I say no? Zhao Zicheng knew that he would definitely not agree after hearing this, so he wasn't discouraged and continued speaking. Perhaps you two were very close in the past, but now, as you can see, she is already the Tianling Emperor. She needs to marry someone of the same status, but you don't have this right. If you really like her and cherish her, then for her own good, you should cancel this marriage and leave. Don't tell me you don't know what self-awareness is. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:15. Chu Liuyue's expression turned cold. Zhao Zicheng, Rong Xiu held her hand and gave her a reassuring glance. Then, he chuckled, as if he didn't care about Zhao Zicheng's words and didn't show any anger at being provoked. If I can prove that I'm worthy of you, second young master Zhao will take back your words and promise not to disturb you in the future. How about it? Zhao Zicheng didn't expect Rong Xiu to not only not be angry, but also take the initiative to say such a thing. He couldn't help but frown and ask in return, proof? What proof do you have? Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent. He stood there, as ethereal and cold as a landscape painting, exuding an indescribable charm. Whatever you can think of, just do it. His voice was light and nonchalant, as if he didn't take this matter to heart at all. This was the kind of confidence that could only come from a person with great strength. Zhao Zicheng's first reaction was that it was absurd. This Rong Xiu truly didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He even dared to say such a thing. Did he know what kind of existence the Tianling dynasty was? Any one of the people here might be able to easily crush him. This made Zhao Zicheng even more dissatisfied and indignant. Such an arrogant and domineering man didn't deserve to be with her. Even if she didn't like him, Zhao Zicheng, and chose other outstanding young talents, he had nothing to say. But this Rong Xiu couldn't do it. Zhao Zicheng clenched his fists and said, "All right, since you dare to face it head-on, this young master won't deliberately make things difficult for you. One's background can't be chosen, so there's no need to compare. As long as you can prove that you're outstanding enough. May I ask, young Master Rong, what kind of cultivation do you practice? Martial artist, mystic master, or celestial physician?" Rong Xiu raised his brows slightly. "May I know which one second young Master Zhao is best at?" Zhao Zicheng froze for a moment, then straightened his body and said with a slightly solemn expression, "Mystic master." He actually dabbled in the other two fields, but comparatively speaking, his talent as a mystic master was the best. His cultivation as a mystic master was also the highest. Then I'll be a mystic cultivator. Rong Xiao said indifferently. There was a moment of silence. After a moment, Zhao Zicheng opened his eyes slightly and asked in surprise and shock, Mystic cultivator. Are you sure? He had already said that he was best at being a Xian master, but Rong Xiao just had to choose this, I'm sure. Of course, if second young master Zhao wanted to compete in other aspects, Rong Xiao would naturally accompany him to the end. Rong Xiao's expression was calm and there was a hint of a smile on his lips. He seemed to be very patient. His reaction completely provoked Zhao Zicheng. Good. That was a Xian master. If you can defeat me, from now on, I will never get involved in these matters again. Also, from now on, stay away from you, Rong Xiao reminded. Zhao Zicheng choked. All right. Hearing the answer, Rong Xiao nodded with satisfaction. Chu Luiyue glanced at Rong Xiao. This is, on purpose. Why do I feel that Rong Xiao deliberately induced Zhao Zicheng to say these words? Zhao Zicheng composed himself. In that case, let's make an appointment, let's do it today. Before he finished speaking, a low and powerful voice came from not far away. They looked back and saw that Sheng Guanyu had already walked out of Yuan Hall. The words just now came from his mouth. Father! Chu Luiyue shouted. Rong Xiao cupped his fists and bowed to Sheng Guanyu. Rong Xiao greets your majesty. Zhao Zicheng didn't expect Sheng Guanyu to appear at this time. Thinking that he seemed to have heard everything just now, he was a little nervous and also bowed. Shock flashed across Sheng Guanyu's eyes as he sized Rong Xiao up, but there was also a tinge of admiration. He waited in Yuanhe Hall for a long time, but no one came. Later, he heard from the palace servants that a few people were quarreling outside, so he planned to come out and take a look. At first glance, he saw his baby Yu. Then, he turned his gaze and saw another man in white standing beside her. Seeing that the two were standing very close to each other, he had already guessed the identity of this person. Although he only saw the back of Rong Xiao just now, Sheng Guanyu could still vaguely sense the noble and imposing aura of Rong Xiao. He was a little surprised. Even the ordinary children of the aristocratic families couldn't compare to such an imposing manner. He had been sitting on the throne for a long time, so he had an excellent eye for people. Rong Xiao exuded a noble aura that only a person of high status would have. He had seen Emperor Yao Qin a few times, but he couldn't be compared to this person. He didn't seem like someone who could be raised by an existence like Emperor Yao Qin, so your Rong Xiao, standing close to him and sizing him up, Sheng Guanyu finally saw Rong Xiao's face clearly. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Isn't he too good-looking? Even he had to admit that he'd never seen such a peerlessly noble appearance that was like an immortal's in his life. Even Jiang Yuqing, who was famous for being the most handsome man in Xiling, paled in comparison to her instantly. In comparison, it was like a firefly competing with the sun and the moon. The contrast was simply tragic. With just one look, Sheng Guanyu immediately understood why his daughter liked him. With such a face, he was probably a young girl who was in love. Her heart would be moved at the sight of him. If he hadn't eavesdropped for a while just now and felt that this man was quite responsible and courageous, Sheng Guanyu almost suspected that his baby daughter was simply bewitched by this devilish face. Father, Rong Xiao and I were going to visit you, but we didn't expect to meet second young Master Zhao. We were delayed for a while. You won't be angry, right? Chu Luiyue blinked. Sheng Guanyu laughed. He knew that she was speaking up for Rong Xiao, but he felt inexplicably unhappy when he saw how protective she was of Rong Xiao. Do you think your father is such a petty person? Zhao Zicheng's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. So they had made an appointment long ago. Then wouldn't he, Thinking of this, Zhao Zicheng suddenly felt even more nervous. Shangguan Yu looked at Zhao Zicheng and sighed in his heart. Although Zhao Zicheng was outstanding in all aspects, what could he do if you didn't like him? Back then, Zhao Zicheng left West Hills sadly because of the engagement between Yu and Jiang Yuqing. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't know. Now that Jiang Yuqing was defeated and imprisoned, Zhao Zicheng still had feelings for Yu, and especially came to ask for her hand in marriage. There was nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. Since you have made an appointment, there's no time like the present. Let's do it today. He also wanted to see how powerful Rong Xiu was. Yu had praised him before, but he still didn't quite believe it. Only when he saw it with his own eyes could he be sure. Coincidentally, there's a martial arts field behind Yuanhe Hall. Let's do it there. Since Shangguan Yu had said so, the rest of the people naturally wouldn't object. Everyone began to walk into Yuanhe Hall. Chu Luyue pulled Rong Xiu's sleeve and whispered, "Rong Xiu, when did you cultivate as a Xian master?" Zhao Zicheng is very talented in this aspect. Can you do it? Mobile users, please browse for a more high-quality reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:16. When Rong Xiu heard this, his footsteps paused slightly. He glanced at her and raised his eyebrows slightly. A faint light flashed across his deep phoenix eyes. For some reason, Chu Luyue suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. It was extremely dangerous. He didn't open his mouth, but a voice as weak as a fly clearly entered her ears. Don't say such things in the future. Chu Luyue blinked and vaguely felt that she had committed a huge taboo. What did I just say? Put your heart back in your stomach. Rong Xiu gave his wife a warning look. Your man is very good at everything. Chu Luyue's face heated up slightly, and her ears burned a little. She immediately looked away and followed the crowd forward. TSK, wasn't she also worried about him? After all, they had known each other for so long, but she still didn't know that Rong Xiu was actually a mystic cultivator. Although she knew that Rong Xiu was very strong in the past, she had always thought that he was only a martial artist. Now that she was going to compete with Zhao Zicheng as a mystic cultivator, she really didn't have any confidence. Zhao Zicheng's talent in this aspect was only slightly weaker than hers. After so many years of diligent cultivation, it wasn't hard to imagine how powerful his cultivation had become as a mystic cultivator. Rong Xiu was actually so calm. However, a certain someone who had been warned by Yan Jing naturally didn't dare to ask any more questions. Since he had such a reaction, he should have some confidence. Seeing Rong Xiu's calm and confident appearance as if he didn't take this matter seriously, Chu Luyue, who was originally a little worried, gradually relaxed. This man seemed to have never needed her to worry about. Yuanhe Hall, martial arts training field in the backyard. Rong Xiu and Zhao Zicheng stood facing each other. Shangguan Yu and Chu Luyue sat below the field. Around them stood the black cavalry who were in charge of guarding. It was quiet all around. Everyone's gaze was focused on the two people on the field. Some were curious, while others were doubtful. Now, everyone here already knew that the man in white, Rong Xiu, was Her Majesty's fiancé. Since Zhao Zicheng failed to marry Her Majesty, the two of them decided to compete. Since this matter involved Chu Luyue, it would naturally cause a huge commotion. At this moment, although everyone looked very calm on the surface, their hearts were already surging with waves. Outside the palace gates in the distance, some palace servants were huddled together, cautiously looking in this direction. I heard that the man in white was Her Majesty's fiancé in country Yaoqin. I think he's the 7th prince of country Yaoqin. Yaoqin. Isn't that a vassal state of Tianling? Even though he is a prince, his status doesn't match His Majesty's. But such a graceful appearance, is truly rare in the world. Previously, I thought that second young Master Zhao was quite good. However, I don't know why, but when I compare the two of them, I actually feel that second young Master Zhao is slightly inferior. These are all external things, they're not that important. Her Majesty's status is noble. Even if she agrees, I'm afraid the courtiers won't nod their heads easily. When second young Master Zhao left Xiling, he was already a level 7 Mystic Master. After a few years, I wonder how much he has improved. I'm afraid this duel is going to be difficult. Zhao Zicheng looked at Rongxiu opposite him and cupped his fists. Please, Rongxiu nodded indifferently. Seeing how calm he was, Zhao Zicheng frowned. I'll let him be arrogant for a while longer. When we really fight, he'll know what it means to say that there's always someone better than you. There are some people that a mere 7th Prince of Yaoqin can't obtain. Zhao Zicheng held his breath and focused. He slightly staggered his feet and raised his hand. A silver force as thick as a thumb instantly flew out from his palm. That force was extremely pure. It danced lightly in the wind, but it contained a powerful pressure. Then, Zhao Zicheng waved his hands. That force actually split into hundreds of forces in an instant. Moreover, each of them was the same thickness as the first one. The aura of each force was completely the same. To be able to gather these forces together and quickly split them up again, it was enough to prove that Zhao Zicheng's control of the force was already at the peak of perfection. Countless silver lines circled around his hands. They were like swimming fishes, swift and agile. Then, these lines began to intertwine and overlap, quickly forming a huge circular Xian formation. As the pattern on the Xian formation became more and more complex, Zhao Zicheng's aura also rose rapidly. In just a few breaths of time, the silver Xian formation was already so complicated that it was dazzling. Buzz! A heavy pressure spread out from the Xian formation. As it slowly rotated, the void at the edge of it was actually silently cut open by black spatial cracks. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the power of this Xian formation was. Sheng Guanyu was very surprised. He sat up slightly and stared at the Xian formation. I really didn't expect. Zhao Zicheng has already broken through to become a level 8 Mystic Master. With such pressure, he was definitely a level 8 Mystic Master. It could be seen that he had not slacked off in the past few years and had been cultivating with all his might. Calculating his age, he was not even 30 years old this year. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, there were very few people who could break through to level 8 Mystic Master at this time. After saying that, Sheng Guanyu turned his gaze and looked at Rongxiu opposite him. He was slightly stunned. Rongxiu stood tall and slender with one hand behind his back, looking calm and composed. He actually hasn't moved yet. When Zhao Zicheng had already started and even the high-level Xian formation was about to be completed, Rongxiu actually didn't react at all. Is he planning to give up directly? But even if his strength is not as good as Zhao Zicheng's, he should at least try his best, right? What does he mean by standing still like this? Sheng Guanyu couldn't help but frown. Chu Luiyue looked at this scene and felt very strange, but more than that, she was curious. To be honest, until now, she still didn't know what level Rongxiu's strength was at. Moreover, today was a Mystic Master competition. She really wanted to see how strong Rongxiu was in this aspect. Zhao Zicheng took in all of Rongxiu's reactions. His mood, which was already bad, instantly became even worse. This scene looked like he was going all out, but Rongxiu didn't care about it at all. Zhao Zicheng pursed his lips and injected another stream of force into the Xian formation. A huge figure appeared on the Xian formation. At first glance, it looked like a tiger. Startling tiger formation. Roar! Following this earth-shattering roar, the ferocious tiger suddenly leaped out and went straight for Rongxiu. In the next moment, a white figure suddenly appeared in front of Rongxiu. It was clearly a white lion. Its icy blue eyes stared coldly at the ferocious tiger phantom as it raised its paw indifferently. Swoosh! The white light was like a blade, and in an instant, it tore the incomparably ferocious phantom into pieces. Rongxiu looked up, and his thin lips curved up as he smiled. This won't do. Let's change it to someone I can fight. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:17. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before the crowd could realize what had happened, they saw the white tiger illusion, which had an imposing aura, dissipate in an instant. At this moment, even the Xian formation started to crack. Crack! The originally complicated and powerful Xian formation was instantly covered with spiderweb-like cracks. Zhao Zicheng's heart sank as he quickly retreated. The moment he left his original spot, the huge silver Xian formation shattered instantly. Boom! With a loud bang, the Xian formation turned into countless dazzling rays of light that scattered in all directions. The terrifying impact wreaked havoc in all directions. Zhao Zicheng only felt a tightness in his chest, and the pressure on his shoulders was as heavy as 2 mountains. But at this moment, he no longer had the mood to care about this. He only looked at the Rongxiu in horror. How could this be? How could this be? The Rongxiu didn't even make a move. He only sent out a magical beast and easily destroyed the Xian formation that he had painstakingly set up. And the Rongxiu's words made him even more embarrassed. His face was red and white, and the blood in his chest was surging. He originally thought that he could easily finish off the other party with one move, but he didn't expect that he would be the one at a disadvantage in the end. He was shocked and anxious, and couldn't help but look at the white lion in front of the Rongxiu. Its body was snow white, and only its eyes were ice blue. Its entire body carried a dense chill. Just by standing there quietly, the ground beneath it was already covered with a layer of frost. This is your contracted magical beast? Zhao Zicheng asked in disbelief. From the attack just now, this white lion's rank was at least 8th grade, or even higher. It wasn't that Zhao Zicheng had never seen a higher rank magical beast. After all, Chu Liuyue's 9-colored heavenly pheasant was 9th grade. And in the next few years, when he was traveling outside, he was lucky enough to see it once or twice. He didn't know if it was his illusion, but the pressure and aura around this white lion seemed to be even stronger than the 9th grade magical beasts he had seen before. Just as this absurd and terrifying thought appeared, Zhao Zicheng immediately extinguished it. Impossible. Any contract between a magical beast and a human had to be based on the conditions. Generally speaking, only when a cultivator was powerful enough would he be able to make a contract with a magical beast willingly. If this white lion was really that Rongxiu's strength, Zhao Zicheng closed his eyes tightly, trying to get rid of these distracting thoughts, but his back was still drenched in cold sweat. Rongxiu was probably much stronger than he had expected. Chu Liyue was originally watching leisurely from the side. When he saw Xue come out, he raised his eyebrows slightly. Judging from Xue's attack just now, its strength was almost on par with a 9th grade magical beast. She remembered that when they first met, Xue was indeed a high-level magical beast, but it was only around the 7th rank. How did it suddenly become so much stronger? One had to know that the grade of a magical beast was determined from birth. Only a very small number of magical beasts could increase their grade through continuous breakthroughs. And all of those magical beasts were existences with extremely powerful bloodlines. Moreover, even if Xue originally had this potential, it seemed a little impossible for it to break through to this realm in such a short time. Chu Liyue touched his chin and narrowed his eyes. Could it be that Shui had deliberately hidden its strength in the past. Or, it actually hadn't shown its true realm yet. At this moment, Rongxiu chuckled and nodded. That's right. On this point, I think I should be worthy of you, Dead silence. Everyone present looked at Rongxiu in shock and speechlessness. What did he mean by that? Now, in the entire Tianling, who didn't know that Chu Luiyue had returned from the death tribulation and ascended to the throne? And a divine beast was following by her side, the red-tailed red phoenix. Didn't Rongxiu mean that his contracted magical beast was also a divine beast? This time, Sheng Guanyu finally couldn't hold back and looked at Chu Luiyue. He actually contracted a divine beast. Why didn't you say before? Just this point alone was enough to earn him a lot of points. After all, in the entire Tianling dynasty, only Chu Luiyue had a divine beast. Chu Luiyue was speechless. She didn't know either. At this time, Sheng Guanyu was still looking at the field, so he didn't notice Chu Luiyue's expression and stroked his beard. When did a prince from the empire of Yaoqin become so powerful? No wonder he's so confident. Chu Luiyue was speechless. Actually, she wanted to ask more. In an instant, countless images appeared in her mind. She used to think that Shui was smart and cute, but she never thought that it was actually a divine beast. The key was that in her knowledge, there didn't seem to be a divine beast that looked like a white lion. Rongxiu had never told her this. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. Even Shui's identity and strength were so shocking. What about Rongxiu? Zhao Zicheng never expected that Rongxiu would casually summon a divine beast. Looking at the white lion, his face was still full of disbelief. A divine beast. What kind of person could make a contract with it? Didn't they say that Rongxiu came from an ordinary background? Where did this divine beast come from? Zhao Zicheng faintly felt uneasy, but at this time, the bet had been set, and the two sides had already started fighting. It was absolutely impossible to stop. He forced himself to calm down, adjust his breath, and began to reconstruct the Xian formation. Previously, he thought that he could win easily, so he didn't use his full strength in the first move. But now, they had to be prepared for battle. Just as Zhao Zicheng began to construct the second Xian formation, a few figures suddenly rushed from the sky outside the palace gate. Your Majesty! Chu Luiyue and Sheng Guanyu turned their heads at the same time and saw Elder Chen Ku and a few others coming together. Elder Chen Ku was the first to land. He quickly ran to Chu Luiyue and Sheng Guanyu and asked nervously, Your Majesty, what happened here? Why was there such a big commotion just now? A few days ago, a big event had just happened in the palace, and their minds were still in a highly sensitive period. Therefore, when they heard the commotion just now, they immediately rushed over, thinking that it was another fight. After asking, Elder Chen Ku and a few others quickly looked around, but found that there was nothing wrong here. On the training field next to them, there were two people confronting each other. Nothing, it's just these two guys fighting. Sheng Guanyu waved his hand, indicating that they didn't need to be nervous. Elder Chen Ku and a few others heaved a sigh of relief. But when they saw the faces of the two people, they were shocked again. What? What's going on? One of them was Zhao Zicheng. Judging from his breath, the commotion just now was caused by him. And the man in white opposite him, a few people wanted to ask, but they felt that the atmosphere was not right, so they all kept quiet and looked at the field. At this time, Zhao Zicheng's second Xian formation was completed. The pressure on it was obviously much stronger than before. He took a deep breath and used all his strength to send out the Xian formation. One Yang formation. Digression, 6:00 clock. Then, he just found that a few chapters were blocked. I'll change the text. Whoa. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.